Well, welcome. Hello everyone. Bonsoir tout le monde. Ceci va être en anglais, mais il va avoir la traduction en français là, que vous pouvez suivre avec. So, welcome everybody, and I'm going to give everybody a chance to come in. And hopefully, we're not going to shock you too much tonight, but this is really important. And it's unbelievable to see what's actually going on, what's transpiring in the world, and then exactly what Donald Trump is doing and everybody else worldwide. Okay. The CBDC is coming. Okay. So I'm just going to play a little something for you and I'll be right
Attention,
back.
Canadians. Do you feel disconnected from our current political system? This could be our last chance to take a real legal stand for our rights. It's time to shift the political power to its rightful owners, the Canadian citizens and Indigenous peoples of Canada. Dive into our history, understand the need for change, and embark on the quest for true democracy. Are you concerned about our nation's commitment to human rights and self-governance? The power shift to freedom aligns with vital treaties and international laws enabling us to claim our rightful place as collective head of state. We advocate legally replacing the Crown, King Charles III, and our partocracy system with a true democracy, the peoples as the true collective head of state with veto power over our governance, to ensure your voice counts more than party interests. When our national collective civil and political rights are respected, your influence on policies will be direct and impactful. Join us on this noble struggle to make every Canadian and Indigenous peoples a meaningful participant in our future as collective head of state, which was legally owed and kept from us since the patriation of our Constitution, an official decolonization from the United Kingdom of 1982. It's time to correct the past of our government's lies and omissions to the people of our great country before it is too late. People 15 years old and over can sign our Canadian People's Referendum at canadianreferendum.ca and unite for our rights as the collective head of state in our Constitution. Together, we can be the example in reshaping Canada's future, not just for us, but for all peoples worldwide, once and for all. Are you ready to be part of this transformative movement? Join the Power Shift to Freedom movement by the Canadian People's Union and be part of a bold vision for Canada's future. Visit thecpu.ca for more details. Embrace and face the change required on your part to shape our future.
And we're back. So, anyways, I've been doing a lot of researching, a lot of reading, a lot of digging, and that's why you haven't seen much of me because all hell is breaking loose. Okay, starting with the United States. So I'm glad that it's happening to them and not to us, but in one sense, but at the same time, um, it's really interesting to see the developments. So I know that Donald Trump has been saying a lot of things negative about Canada, wants to have Canada. Why? He needs our resources. Why? The United States is broke. And the United States has been taking a lot of money away from the peoples, their own people, and actually spending too much and not enough coming back in. So when Donald Trump is talking about we have a deficit with Canada, it's how much he owes us money wise. Okay. It's how much the United States owe us. So you have China and Japan and the UK that have the biggest loans out to the US. Okay. So I remember, we were questioning, why did the Queen sign documents from the IRS in uh, the United States back in 1997? Well, it's because of monies owed to other countries. So, and that's all has to do with trade and everything else. So, anyways, uh, you know, I've got somebody here. Seems like you got more research to do because you're way out to lunch. I don't think so, Danny. And, if you don't like this channel, please walk away. We're not going to be missing you. So, anyways, I have been doing a lot of research, and the ones who accuse us of not doing enough research haven't done their own. So, I'm going to start with the fact that the CBDC, in Europe, they're trying to bring out the CBDC by October 2025. Okay. And but the thing is that they did have problems with the CBDC a couple of years back because there's not enough energy being created to be able to build, first of all, the buildings that they're going to need for all of the technology. All of the servers are going to have to keep feeding into this to be able to have everybody, in regards to all of our information, all to store all the data. There's quite a few out there. There's Aladdin. There's also Alibaba. But now the United States says, oh, they're going to be the capital of AI, and they need our water, they need our electricity, they need our minerals. Okay, so that's why. So when I see people saying, oh, they want to become the 51st state, they want to be part of the United States, they're cowards. Because if you've listened to our video earlier, we have in 1982 the people were decolonized. Mind you, there were things that were supposed to be done post decolonization, and the Canadian government never did it. But technically, we own the people. We, the people, own this country. All of those natural resources are ours. Now, it's the same thing for Greenland. Okay, they own those natural resources, not Denmark, not anybody else. Okay, so and this is why Trump wants it. But the thing is if you go way back to Agenda 21, when all of this came out in 1992, and Canada bringing on the World Trade Organization, we were the first country to do it, and all of these things, and now with the IMF and everything else, all interconnected and everything, all of our monies were kind of had accepted the US dollar, but now the US dollar is going down, and they have to do this on purpose to restructure the whole financial system of the planet. Okay, so you don't need to believe me, and you just need to listen to these videos that I've put up. And especially for the French people listening, pour les Français, là, il va avoir, vous pouvez lire en bas, parce que je ne pouvais pas les avoir traduits, là, les vidéos qu'on va vous montrer. But it's really important to understand that why is Carney, okay, and why does Trump would rather have the liberals instead of the Democrats? It doesn't matter which ones, okay? He just needs to create chaos so that we're all screwed up. And now he's trying to interfere in our politics. So if you go and look to see how much the UK, now you know why the UK and Japan went to the United States, because they're worried about their money. Okay, and if you look at the Five Eyes, I should actually bring up a photo of the Five Eyes. But the Five Eyes, okay, and you need to understand this because that started in the Harper days, okay? And again, we whether we're with the conservatives or the liberals, we lose, okay? It doesn't matter. We lose. So they're going to keep going with what they're doing, okay? So the reset is here. It's already here. So how do we get to stop this? We're the only ones who have the solution to make it count for the people instead of the oligarchs, instead of the rich people. Okay, so we still come out on top if the people want this done. If the people want a savior and don't believe in themselves, then we're going to lose to the oligarchy again in this reshuffle of monetary system worldwide. But because now I'd like to say before we start, the CBDC, like I was saying, they needed too much energy, so they couldn't do it. BC said we don't have enough water to be able to do the CBDC, at least not yet. So they thought, okay, well, let's bring LNG in here and let's get all of these corporations going so that we can produce enough energy for all of this data that we need to be able to track everybody with a social credit system. And why do they love China? I mean, even the United States, they pretend they don't like China, but they want to be in charge of the social credit system. And Peter Thiel and Trump and all of his tech bros are taking over the planet, or think they're going to take over the planet. And they found a way of going ahead with the digital ID without doing the whole thing, but at least launching it at a smaller pace, where we're going to be dealing with our banks. So all of this is going to be explained to you. And then you're going to see that there's a way that we can counter this, okay? And that's the beauty of it, because, egotistical people like to show off. And they tell on themselves because they just can't help it. Okay, so now I'm going to be sharing a video with you. That one's an hour long, and that'll give you the basics of what's going on. And this is a really good documentary that was done by a gentleman by the name of James Patrick. And it's well worth to see because it really hits home on this one. And then I made another one. It's a whole bunch of different little videos to show you what is actually happening and how the United States is planning on conning people into thinking, you're all going to be billionaires. I'm going to make you all rich. And at the same time, regulating it. Okay. So please get comfortable. Watch this. Spread it to everybody you know, because the CBDC is here. Okay. So let's move on with this. Okay, I'm just going to do a share screen. Okay. Now. And.
Says you need digital IDs.
A digital ID system could be operating between governments and the private sector as soon as next year.
A CBDC is a digital currency that they think is going to replace all physical cash.
If we lose cash, our money is getting locked into the banking system.
It's hard to overstate how dangerous a path this is.
This is the elimination of the underground economy.
And who's pushing for this? Well, the central planners.
CBDCs is the next step closer to a social credit score.
To boost financial inclusion, Mexico's central bank will launch digital currency by 2024.
There are people who believe in top-down control, and they're excited by the idea of central bank digital currency as what they call a programmable money.
Many of the important qualities of a good money could be changed like this, by programming it, by government decree.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoking emergency powers against the truckers who are protesting vaccine mandates. Banks can now freeze their personal accounts.
We were never charged. There was never a warrant for our arrest.
You're dead in the water at this point.
What you're seeing is the banks in this country have been deputized into law enforcement.
We're lucky that at this point we still have cash that we can rely on.
After a 3-week delay, Nigeria's digital currency is now legal tender.
What they did in Nigeria was they made them the test case for the CBDCs, which is a complete disaster. It turned into burning banks and riots.
And do we want to live in such a society where a small group of central planners have this extraordinary power over everyone's lives?
Even tyranny, starvation, impoverishment, that could be the result.
The powers of CBDCs are so extraordinary Even the worst dictators in past centuries could only have dreamt of having such enormous power over the lives of so many people.
I'm James Patrick, the director of the following film about central bank digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, and the tokenization of every person and object on this planet. You see, money and banking can promote prosperity and freedom, or oppression and slavery. The financial system as we know it now sits at a crossroads. Powerful international banking interests behind each of our central banks and the Bank of International Settlements are in the process of foisting malicious reforms upon all the nations of the world that will limit human freedom on this planet if they succeed. Banking interests are moving to abolish cash worldwide, and with it our civil liberties. I made this film as a warning to the world. Please help spread the word on this important issue and share this film and promote freedom.
A potential CBDC could offer businesses and consumers new ways to pay in the future.
Most Western governments also have these pilot programs, so there is a massive move toward a central bank digital currency.
Around the world, central banks are racing to create their own versions of digital money. And nowhere is this happening faster than in China.
China with a pilot with 128 million participants.
By 2030, Bitcoin will be up and running.
Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell told the House Financial Services Committee in March that the Fed had already begun testing a digital dollar.
So what we're doing is experimenting in kind of early stage experimentation.
法定通貨の円を電子データにしたデジタル円について
The decision will definitely be made to launch the CBDC and to make it a reality.
Central banks around the world are testing, prototyping, and implementing central bank digital currencies. So what are they?
A CBDC is a digital currency that they think is going to replace all physical cash.
Put simply, a central bank digital currency, or a CBDC, is a direct digital liability to the central bank. So rather than have your money in your pocket or in a card with a bank, it's directly maintained by the government.
Central bank digital currencies, they're presented, CBDCs are presented as if it's something brand new, when the reality is we've been using BDCs, bank digital currencies, for many decades.
Fundamentally, a CBDC fails to offer anything unique for consumer. The only benefit that a CBDC seems to offer is for governments that want to enact more control.
A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of central bank liability, and also we will have the technology to enforce that.
As Carol Quigley of Georgetown University once said, there exists a worldwide system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. At the apex of this system is the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, the central bank of central banks. The Bank of International Settlements has created a CBDC program in practically every country of the world through its Innovation Hub, a tech incubator set up for this purpose. The vision these autocrats have for us is to make our money programmable.
The really big dangers of CBDCs are the programmability, which is that essentially it's not even money. It's like your money becomes potential money.
The whole thing about programmable money is they decide when you will have access to it and how you will be able to spend it even. Let's say you're grocery shopping, and since you're expecting guests on the weekend, you buy 4 or 5 bottles of wine, right? On the way home, you decide to fill up your car with gas. You stop at the gas station, but you're not going to be able to pump the gas. Well, you just bought alcohol, right? Look to China. That is going to be our future, and it's not going to be a future in like 30, 40, 50 years from now. It is happening now.
CBDC can allow government agencies and private sector players to allow targeted policy functions. For example, welfare payment. For example, consumption coupon. For example, food stamp.
If Congress decides that we should defund the fossil fuel industry, it would be easy for them to say, you know, the money we're lending you, you're not allowed to lend to the oil industry. And that means politicizing the allocation of credit, which is a very dangerous thing to do.
This is something that affects both sides of the aisle, really, because the options for control through things like programmability are really limitless. It just depends who's in power.
Really what they're doing is having more control over who can buy, who can sell, who can save. And if they want at any point, they can use those programs and the protocols and the blockchains to blacklist your money, to prevent you from making a transaction.
If you think about the benefits of digital money, you can have programmability. You could have, as I argue in my book, a potentially better and some people might see it as a darker world where the government decides that units of central bank money can be used to purchase some things, but not other things that it deems less desirable, like say ammunition or drugs or pornography or something of the sort. And that is very powerful in terms of the use of a CBDC.
In 2019, we had MasterCard introduce a credit card in conjunction with the United Nations that monitored your carbon footprint.
It's the first credit card ever to stop you from overspending, in line with the UN 2030 recommendation.
And once you hit a certain level, it cut off spending,
bringing it to a direct halt, making it a radical tool against climate change.
The Bank of England was the first to come out and said, oh, well, you know, they should be programmable. The excuse was laughable, but they said a mother should be able to prevent her child from buying a chocolate bar for lunch instead of a sandwich. If a mother can program what you're not allowed to buy, they can. All right, that's the back door.
When they describe programmability, that's what it's all about. That you can, I mean, of course, they present it from a positive side. We can give money to the people who really need it. That's how they will formulate it. But the other side of the coin is that this means that they have their ideas on who should spend money on what and when.
To better understand the implications of these technologies, we must look at the social credit system of China, which has been heavily praised by the likes of Klaus Schwab, head of the World Economic Forum.
The biggest dangers of a central bank digital currency system can be seen in China, where it's linked in to the surveillance state. If everybody has an account on the books of a government-owned bank, then the government has access in real time to what people are buying. And if it wants to, it can censor those payments. Oh, you don't have enough social credit points? You can't buy that train ticket.
Everywhere she goes, Ouyang Haoyu is followed. What she buys, how she behaves, is tracked and scored to show how responsible and trustworthy she is.
They're constantly monitored by facial recognition cameras that are able to instantly put a face to a name.
CBDCs is the next step closer to a social credit score.
It's called the social credit system, and in one version now being tested, a person's reputation is scored on a scale of 350 to 950. And Haoyu, with a good score of 752, is okay with it. In fact, most people are.
CBDC is going to enable all of that. So if your purchase is not green enough, you're going to get throttled back on your credit.
China is the totalitarian testbed for the central bankers' technological control systems. In Chinese cities today, it is almost impossible to function without digital payments and biometric identification. The social credit score system in China is nearing perfection.
My name is Vince Gerses. I'm from Toronto, Ontario. I'm a former member of the Ontario Provincial Police. I spent 32 years in law enforcement. I think it's very important to look at the Chinese model because that would be the direction things would seem to go. You know, the Chinese seem to be setting the stage for social credit scores integrated into CBDCs and integrated into automated payment systems and the way they operate there. It's a different structure.
A good score brings benefits, but people with low scores lose rights. The cinema names and shames people considered untrustworthy, plastering their details, even their addresses, across big screens. It's a matter of principle. Those people have to be condemned.
Those people aren't honest, so they have to pay the price.
It's only right to pay your debts. You have to blacklist those that don't.
CBDC will help them do all of this. They don't like what you're thinking, you're going to be debanked.
Unfortunately, what we're seeing in China and now what we're starting to see in the Western world over the last 3 years is a tremendous amount of disrespect for rights and freedoms of people, regardless of what your constitution says. And that's a very dangerous step. It's a very dangerous process.
A parallel technology that is required to make CBDCs work are digital IDs. A person's identity must be verified and linked to their wallet.
Digital IDs are not really a separate project from CBDCs and this new digital financial system.
A key component of central bank digital currencies is digital ID. They go hand in hand with each other to be able to identify with certainty who the person is and then what the transactions are and link them together.
And UN documentation and also documentation from the Bank of International Settlements, they very overtly state that CBDCs and digital IDs are meant to go together, and without digital IDs, the CBDC digital finance system cannot exist. Almost all of these digital IDs rely on biometrics, which can be your fingerprints, your face, the iris of your eyeball. They want to have your wallet tied to a digital ID and have that digital ID be mapped to your physical ID through the biometric data collection. The BRICS countries are doing it, the West is doing it.
Passengers on the Moscow metro can now pay for their commute using facial recognition technology.
Facial recognition checkout is coming to stores and restaurants near you.
Amazon says no two palms are alike. You hold your hand above the device.
Применяет персональные скидки и предлагает подтвердить.
They want to move not just to a cashless society, but a cashless and cardless society. The goal is to have you pay with your face or pay with your biometrics or your palm of your hand. This is already being rolled out at Amazon-owned entities. JP Morgan is piloting it.
MasterCard already working on this new way to pay. JP Morgan has also signed a deal.
I'm sure at some point, if you don't want to use your biometrics for those purposes, then your bank will be like, sorry.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is continuing its global push, and this time setting its sight on Kenya to support its so-called government-backed digital ID programs.
Back in 2016, the most comprehensive biometric digital ID system in the world was deployed in India, a country of 1.4 billion people. If it could be done in India, it could be done anywhere.
Microsoft founder Bill Gates has endorsed India's biometric identification system Aadhaar, saying that it does not pose any privacy risks.
You've been an advocate of Aadhaar, you've supported it, you've defended it, and I think that the questions arise not on whether it's a good idea or not, but whether it should be mandatory for every citizen.
Well, Aadhaar is just something that avoids you pretending to be somebody else. So the basic Aadhaar mechanism is an identity mechanism. And so it's too bad if somebody thinks because Aadhaar is there, that in and of itself creates a privacy problem.
The goal is to link that ocean of data to a biometrically verified digital ID.
Data is now the new commodity. Data is the new oil.
Everyone's movements, purchasing activities, social relations, personal preferences are all being tracked and cataloged. As Indian Prime Minister Modi said, data is the new oil, data is the new gold.
Data is the new oil. Data is the new gold.
What ID 2020 and other organizations like it are doing are issuing the technical standards that all these IDs have to have so that they're interoperable at the base level.
Government and central bank management of digital ID systems violates the constitutions of many countries. So to avoid these legal obstacles, a strategy was taken to blur the lines between public and private sectors through the creation of decentralized interoperable databases. Organizations like ID 2020, funded by the Gates Foundation, are creating the protocols and standards that both public and private entities use to access the data housed in an interoperable, decentralized fashion.
And so the role of the Gates Foundation as an advocate for those who don't have access today is to make sure there's technology and standards.
There are no universally accepted standards for expressing, exchanging, and verifying digital credentials across organizational boundaries. A new form of digital identity, since it's not tied to any one organization, can enable such digital credentials to work everywhere.
We're working with government and the private sector to build the foundation and standards for digital identity across Canada and internationally. The future is closer than you think.
Decentralization isn't always good. Our identifications, personal information, health records, employment information, educational background, travel records, anything you can think of will be available to any authorized public or private sector entity with the right digital credentials. This is a clever way to bypass our civil rights, a pervasive and seamless system of social control through a public-private partnership.
There is no limits to what this digital ID will ultimately hold on data. It's just another way of exercising control over people.
One of the main reasons for this coordinated global push to develop digital IDs is because it's deemed essential to the entire Sustainable Development Agenda.
10 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals cannot be met without first closing the identity gap.
Over 1 billion people worldwide are unable to prove their identity through any recognized means.
The leading alliance that was launched under the auspices of the UN to accomplish that is known as ID 2020.
We live in a digital era.
Individuals need a trusted, verifiable way to prove who they are,
both in the physical world
and online.
The oligarchs behind these schemes, such as the Rockefeller Foundation and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, are pushing this agenda globally through their NGOs and the United Nations. In the developing world, these systems are being sold as a way to promote financial inclusion in an effort to bank the unbanked.
You can have digital financial inclusion.
The reality is that these technologies' whole purpose is to financially exclude anyone that doesn't obey the rules and protocols of the system. Have you been a good little boy or girl today? No? No meat for you. You're not allowed to leave your 15-minute zone.
ID 2020, the UN and other stakeholders in this particular sphere often argue that the reason this is necessary is because of what they call the identity gap. And the identity gap is the claim that the lack of digital ID is preventing people, mainly the world's poor, from accessing essential services, whether it's banking, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare.
A crisis is both a danger and an opportunity. The fact that 1 billion people are today denied this fundamental human right of having a recognized identity is indeed a crisis.
If you don't participate in digital ID, you won't have a legally recognized identity, you won't have rights, you won't be able to access services without it. So it's being framed as promoting inclusion, but the system itself is inherently exclusionary.
These structures being erected will create a system of financial exclusion, not inclusion, not hitherto seen before. Just as biometric IDs were piloted in India, so CBDCs were piloted in Nigeria, a country of almost 230 million people. Nigeria was chosen as the testbed for the launching of CBDCs, as one of the most informal cash economies of the world. If they could make CBDCs work there, they could make them work anywhere, so they thought.
In Nigeria, one of the first countries to get off the ground with its CBDC for a population of over 200 million people. It didn't go well.
So the way the CBDC in Nigeria was set up is that in order to access the CBDC, you have to have a national identification number, which is the Nigerian Digital ID project.
And there are many pilots. Now we have Nigeria stepping there, the largest universe of a pilot.
What they did in Nigeria was they made them the test case for the CBDCs.
After a 3-week delay, Nigeria's digital currency is now legal tender. At its launch, President Muhammadu Buhari says the e-Naira will usher in opportunities for banks, customers, and the country's economy.
At least 60% of the economy was underground.
Out of the gate, about 0.5% of the population was using the CBDC known as the e-Naira. Now, the central bank wanted to spur adoption. That was not a good rate for them to have after they invested all this money. So they announced that there would be no longer requirements for bank accounts to have an e-Naira. That didn't work. A month later, they announced that they would have discounts on the e-Naira. That didn't work either. And that's when the Central Bank of Nigeria took a different path. Suddenly, it announced that it would start restricting cash. Then, as if that wasn't bad enough, it announced that it was going to pull all of the cash off the streets.
Such a task would normally take several years to phase in. Instead, the Nigerian government invalidated all the cash in the country and attempted to roll out the CBDC within 2 months. All cash was canceled, everyone lost their savings, no one had money to buy food, CBDCs were issued, and riots broke out.
There are claims that some persons were killed.
The way things are is not fair. We all are citizens. We only came to at least plead with the bank. The police came out of the central bank, started shooting, attacking us. They even killed people. About 3 persons died today. Nobody wanted to destroy anything.
Months later, despite riots in the streets, despite protests outside of banks, despite people going hungry because they didn't have access to cash that they were dependent on, Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele said this was a success. The adoption rate of the CBDC rose from 0.5% to 6% of the population, celebrated it as a success, as being the currency of choice, in his words. It was not the currency of choice by any means. It was a currency of force.
People have very much resisted in Nigeria the CBDC. They've tried not to use it. The Nigerian government is relatively open that it's completely surveillable and not anonymous. It was designed to surveil. So despite the fact that they created these conditions to coerce people into using the CBDC, the populace resists.
Transforming the underlying economics of financial services through digital currency will help those who live in poverty directly.
These people that ostensibly suffer from this identity gap, that suffer from financial exclusion, don't want the financial inclusion that they're being offered by the CBDC.
The COVID lockdown and vaccination campaigns are informative to understanding the development of CBDCs. During the COVID period, broad social controls were tested and prototyped. Controls that would have only been possible once the CBDC is in place.
The COVID policies, given that they were medically not really justifiable and some of them were very contradictory and nonsensical, but every country in the world seemed to have the same policies. And so there was an extraordinary degree of coordination that was revealed to us.
Global health regulations propagated by the United Nations in this period constituted the first serious attempt at the creation of a world government.
That was an attempt to bring about a single world order.
You know, as from the perspective of the UN and a lot of these other entities, national governments are merely enabling environments or policy enforcers on the policy's subjects, which are the public. They don't write the policies, they're handed the policies. And this is why you have these coordinated pushes, like for example with COVID-19, countries around the world implementing the same responses. And it's the same too for digital ID, for CBDCs or digital currency, they're all functionally the same at the end of the day.
The vaccine passports were a trial run of a system of social exclusion not hitherto seen until that time.
Private companies can deny you services or access if they ask you for proof of vaccination and you decline to show it.
Digital IDs are going to be like vaccine passports on steroids, really. You don't have the right ID, you won't exist.
Vaccine passports are coming. Someday soon, you may need to prove your COVID status to go to the pub, travel abroad, or even go to work.
Hello everyone, meet Lucy, student in psychology, and me, her digital ID wallet issued by the government to offer a wide range of identity services. Right now, I'm reminding Lucy of the appointment she needs to schedule for her mandatory vaccination.
The COVID operation, many of the policies had no proper medical justification or purpose. Whereas if you have to have policies that partly was used to even sort of lay the groundwork for CBDCs, there's plenty of evidence. I mean, why did the Bank of England come out around the time when the first lockdown was announced with its first sort of public consultation about introducing CBDCs and all the benefits and needs of CBDCs?
Today, governments force all banks to follow a strict regulatory regime known as AML and KYC regulations. This stands for Anti-Money Laundering and Know Your Customer regulations.
They started it with the COVID scam. Oh, you can get sick by handling cash. And they talked into a lot of stores saying we no longer accept cash. This was the agenda.
But the collapse in the use of cash, thanks to the COVID crisis.
Money changes hands all the time, but can it carry the coronavirus?
In order to avoid the risk of transmission through physical handling of money, we encourage the use of cashless transactions.
A lot of people aren't using cash. The vast amount of transactions are electronic today.
For CBDCs to properly do their job, you need to get rid of the competition. You need to get rid of cash. That actually is a declared goal of CBDCs.
If we lose cash, our money is getting locked into the banking system. We can no longer withdraw our deposits from the banks. And for instance, central banks could impose negative interest rates and thereby wipe out our savings.
The COVID model is the problem. The government could not come out and restrict free speech. So they had Facebook and everybody else do it. What you really have to understand is you have no right to free speech. It's not a constitutional right. It's a restraint upon government. The Fed would have to get a search warrant to go through your accounts. If the bank basically issues the digital dollar, bank doesn't need a search warrant.
Americans do not have financial privacy. They have deputized banks as these sort of law enforcement investigators and force them to observe and report on the government's behalf because of laws like the Bank Secrecy Act, the Patriot Act.
Since the 1960s, these regulations have gotten stronger and stronger. Banks are required to monitor and surveil everything we do and report all suspicious activities to the government. Even if CBDCs are not achieved in some countries, an escalation of AML and KYC policies can produce a system just as oppressive as CBDCs. These AML and KYC regulations need to be reduced or eliminated to restore our civil rights.
This can quickly expand, and that's what the history of financial surveillance and control has been, one of steady expansion. And the more that expands, the more people are going to want to avoid that system. They need to stop this practice, surveilling all financial transactions.
A social credit system needs excuses to be implemented. One talking point that is likely to be used to rationalize the implementation of CBDCs is that we need to save the environment, that we need to live sustainably, or we are just being selfish.
I hear people say, your future's bright. But after this past year, I wonder if that's still true. When I see the news, sometimes I'm overwhelmed.
Entire ecosystems are collapsing.
London's Mayor Sadiq Khan has slammed global policymakers for their alleged inaction towards worsening climate crisis.
As real environmental issues go ignored, focus of these policies have everything to do with controlling people and economically handicapping them.
The Oxfordshire County Council approved plans to lock residents into one of 6 zones to save the planet from global warming.
Another hyped crisis. Of course, I'm talking about climate change.
During the COVID episode, an idea floated by media and governments were that lockdowns were needed to save the planet. Climate lockdowns, they called them.
Could climate lockdowns be on the horizon?
It's the idea that emissions start going far too high. The government is going to have to do things about it.
They will ban private vehicles from 6 areas at certain times and are set to be introduced next year.
They want control over almost every aspect of your life. They want more of your money and your freedom. We need to aggressively push back at every turn.
I mean, we are talking about dystopian digital prisons that will be created through central bank digital currencies, because the programmability, and this has been mentioned in the studies by central banks, include, of course, geography. And there's this proposal for climate change, for whatever reasons, that, people should stay within their 15-minute walking small local area and be restricted.
The Oxfordshire Council will place electronic gates on key roads in and out of the city confining residents to their own neighborhoods.
What if we could create a new normal where we reclaim our time, our health and well-being, and our communities?
This is the idea behind the 15-minute city. A 15-minute city is one where everything we need is close to home, where communities are safe and inclusive.
The 15-minute ghettos, it's not about saving the planet. It's not about adding quality to your life and making life easier for you. No, it's to lock you down. That's the whole purpose of it.
The use of questionable arguments, squarely focused on controlling people rather than benefiting the environment, should give everyone pause.
That was a health emergency, so we needed the vaccine passports. Now we have a climate emergency, and we need a system to control human behavior in Canada.
These are mechanisms of control that, once they take hold of you, the ability to revolt or have a revolution will be gone. And it seems like that may be the intention. Don't allow the people to rise up against overreach and over control and authoritative states by implementing a system that can shut people down immediately.
So I think one of the reasons they want this new system that ultimately amounts to a control system is because they see it as the ultimate form of risk management. They essentially want to move to a system that's not unlike the feudal system that existed in medieval Europe. You have, a privileged, untouchable upper class and a low class of serfs. But if you implement a system this way with the technology they're using, you don't have to worry about peasant rebellions. You can manage the risk of the underclass. So you surveil them constantly. You can turn their money on and off. You can turn their access to services and really anything else on and off as well.
What happens when your government goes rogue? What happens when your government becomes tyrannical? What happens when your government makes tyrannical demands against the population? What recourse do you have? The word slavery comes to mind, and I see it as being irreversible. I see that once we go to a digitized currency that is controllable by a central platform, that you will no longer have the freedoms to make those choices that we do now. That freedom will be gone.
To them, CBDCs is like the pinnacle of what they could achieve, and they're so close to it, but we have to stop it.
A documentary on CBDCs would not be whole unless it touched on the subject of Bitcoin. We must understand that without the invention of Bitcoin, CBDCs would not have been possible. In the middle of the financial crisis of 2008, Bitcoin was released anonymously onto cypherpunk forums. It was the first peer-to-peer encrypted digital money system that utilized blockchain technology. Now let's take a look at the background of Bitcoin.
At this very important time in US dollar history, right, it's the great financial crisis is like peaking.
The stock market is now down 21%.
It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
This could be the most serious recession in decades.
What started in America last year has now spread to every part of the world.
It was released anonymously into this cypherpunk mailing list.
Now, this is the first peer-to-peer monetary transaction. In other words, you didn't need to go through a bank or a financial middle person.
The Bitcoin white paper that was published by an anonymous person.
Satoshi is what everybody calls him, right? Yeah. We don't even know if it's a him or her. We know nothing about this person. Publishes a fairly elaborate, brief white paper, which describes the technical basis for this new thing that the unknown person is calling Bitcoin.
The program was launched. I had won a victory against the banks, against state power.
It's immediately painted as this anti-dollar system, anti-central bank technology.
Crypto people aren't just in it to make a buck, they're in it to change the world forever.
Crypto is as important of an invention as the birth of the internet.
There's a lot of merit to it. If you're in a country where you're fearful of your government, fearful of geopolitical risk, this is a great potential long-term store of value. It's no different than what gold represented over thousands of years. If the world is more frightened, it is a asset class that protects you. Right. You could buy and sell your Bitcoin, no different than gold.
Is Bitcoin a true revolution from the beginning? Or was it always planned to be this Trojan horse for the Internet of Things? I'm not sure.
And I don't care if it was the CIA. It doesn't matter. The idea is still a great idea. Obviously, it was the CIA. I think we all know that. It's like Signal. They got there first. It's a honey trap.
Blockchain was invented by Bitcoin and forms the technological basis of CBDCs. The true identity of Bitcoin's inventor, Satoshi Nakamoto, remains a secret to this day. A man named Craig Wright claimed to be Satoshi, and another man was accused of being him. Both of these men made suspicious remarks implying that Bitcoin was an intelligence operation of some kind.
Newsweek reports that he is a mastermind behind Bitcoin.
64-year-old Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto emerged and walked right into a media frenzy. When confronted about Bitcoin, he said, "I am no longer involved in that, and I cannot discuss it."
I was the main part of it. Other people helped me. I didn't decide. I had people decide this matter for me.
Now, there remains the possibility that the central bankers utilized the Western intelligence services to create Bitcoin. Bitcoin tested and prototyped cryptocurrency technology and served to market digital money as cool and anti-system. And now, 15 years later, with all the programming having been done and the technology in a more mature state, the central bankers can cherry pick the best tech with which to deploy their CBDCs worldwide.
It's incredibly likely that Bitcoin was an intelligence operation that came out of the US or Britain or some sort of kind of the Five Eyes kind of system. It's entirely possible. I mean, there's a lot of connections with certain algorithms to the NSA. SHA-256, which is kind of the main hashing algorithm in Bitcoin, was invented by the NSA.
We are also now witnessing the rapid development of the Internet of Things and the Internet of Bodies. These are all information networks linking all people and things to the Internet. As well, NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, further build out the underlying technology required to enable digital IDs to take shape.
Internet of Things, or IoT, refers to billions of physical devices around the world that are now connected to the Internet, collecting and sharing data.
The Internet of Bodies, or IOB, is actually an ecosystem. It's a bunch of devices that are connected to the Internet that contain software and that either collect personal health data about you or can alter the body's function. We think of the Internet of Bodies as this collection of all these devices as well as all the data that the devices are gathering about you.
Now to the latest trend that's sweeping the internet, called NFT.
They're now selling for huge bucks.
Non-fungible tokens are digital tokens that enable true ownership of any kind of digital assets. You can't touch it, but you can own it. Told you had to pay attention.
NFTs are unique encrypted unforgeable ID tags for any object or asset, physical or virtual. This tech can be directly applied to the Internet of Things and the Internet of Bodies. Were NFTs also promoted to spur the development of tokenizing all assets worldwide? I suspect so.
Decentralized identifiers leverage proven cryptographic systems. When Alice presents her credentials, her digital wallet generates a unique identifier and signs it using a private key, secured by a biometric proof or PIN that only she knows. Decentralized identifiers leverage proven cryptographic systems.
Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI and ChatGPT, launched a project called WorldCoin. He stated his motivation to launch the project was to build the infrastructure needed for a universal basic income.
I thought that if we could do something to eventually redistribute wealth through some sort of global UBI at scale, or maybe even access to these systems, which would be the most important component of wealth someday.
Sam Altman has doubled down on his vision for another one of his ventures, WorldCoin cryptocurrency, that offers digital currency, sometimes for free, to those willing to scan their irises into a spherical device.
Many critics of CBDCs fear that a universal basic income will be the bait to gull the public into accepting a CBDC.
Give everyone a cattle tag and a shit coin, basically. That's the WorldCoin model.
You know my views on CBDCs, and I'm really pleased that attention is now focused on the role that cryptos can play.
As the crypto markets matured, many exchanges emerged to trade Bitcoin for thousands of other alternative coins. These transactions were all denominated in fractions of Bitcoin and became difficult to calculate. So stablecoins emerged that were pegged to the US dollar or euro that made trading in and out of alternative coins much easier to do.
Traders buy tokens like Tether or USD coin with real dollars.
Those tokens can then be used to trade bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies. Stablecoins are cryptocurrencies whose value are pegged to an existing asset, most often the US dollar, though there are others tied to the euro and gold too.
Stablecoins like Tether have been a way to transition the wild market of cryptos into the mainstream financial system. The biggest of these stablecoins is Tether, itself tethered to the US dollar.
Tether was the first of what's known as a stablecoin. Its price is pegged or tethered to that of the dollar, so one tether equals $1, 1-to-1 there.
In 2013, Bitfinex incorporates in Hong Kong. In September of 2014, Bitfinex operators set up Tether Limited in the British Virgin Islands. But they tell the public that Bitfinex and Tether are completely separate. The only reason we find out they aren't is because of the Paradise Papers leaks.
And on an average day, Tether sees more trading volume than Bitcoin or Ethereum. But Tether is not 100% backed by US dollars in a bank account. And according to JP Morgan, it is now the 7th largest holder of commercial paper in the world.
There's some controversy around it, and this is not short of that.
That's right. There's been plenty of controversy.
Its founders have a very questionable background.
This group of individuals who run Tether have a bit of, let's call it, to be charitable, a mixed reputation, or that they've been printing tethers in some way to manipulate the price of Bitcoin.
We're seeing a worrying trend of the largest American banks moving into the Bitcoin and blockchain space. JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, they're going to issue stable coins to their retail-facing customers.
We have seen the biggest banks on Wall Street also issue their own US dollar tokens.
JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, they're all creating their own digital dollars.
JP Morgan rolling out the first cryptocurrency backed by a US bank.
If you are concerned about CBDCs because of the programmability and surveillance aspects, tokenized deposits and bank-issued stablecoins can do all of those things too.
They're recreating that exact same mechanism, except instead of the public sector, it's private banks. They want to blacklist someone, they want to seize your money, prevent a transaction from going through. It's much easier to do that through a private sector entity than it is through the public sector.
The Constitution of the United States prevents a CBDC system that will restrict people's rights, but private banks can restrict their customers with their private issue stablecoins without any constitutional problems.
We will see this fight against CBDCs by the likes of DeSantis and Trump and Vivek.
Governor Ron DeSantis took aim at a new currency the Biden administration is exploring.
Are you interested in giving these economic central planners more power?
I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency.
So when you have people like Trump and Ron DeSantis say no CBDC, they mean no public-facing CBDC. They don't mean no wholesale CBDC. What this second tier managed by the private banks is likely to be are things like tokenized deposits, stable coins.
And there'll be this total red herring false victory as then they move into the private stable coin system that in every single way is the CBDC, except it's not issued directly by the government.
There's going to be a two-tier system, not unlike what exists in the US today, where it's going to be one tier is the private sector and one tier is the public sector, i.e. the central bank. And it's basically going to be banks issuing stable coins or tokenized deposits, the reserves of which are banked at the Fed. A lot of people are hesitant about a CBDC because they see it as centralized government control. And so they're selling it this way, so we, will look at it as, oh, this is coming from the private sector. This is free market innovation and all of this stuff. But people forget that the Wall Street banks time and again have been caught engaging in brazen criminality.
January 11th, we saw 11 spot ETFs approved. Kind of the most important, sort of biggest signpost of that approval within these 11 was the iShares BlackRock spot ETF Bitcoins.
Explain that move into ETFs. How far does it go?
ETFs are going to be the new engine for fixed income.
Bitcoin has always been sort of, colored as this anti-state revolution and this total rejection against the powers that be, the financial elite. And here we have probably, the most important asset manager in the world in BlackRock coming out and ETFing Bitcoin.
We believe ETFs are a technology no different than Bitcoin was a technology for asset storage. We believe the next step going forward will be the tokenization of financial assets.
BlackRock has initiated a comprehensive effort to EFT everything. This is a stepping stone to a completely tokenized financial system where every asset on Earth is represented by an encrypted, unforgeable digital token. The goal of all this is the creation of a universal ledger of all the world's assets.
If you had a tokenized security and you have a tokenized identity, the moment you buy or sell an instrument, it's known. It's on a general ledger that is all created together.
He recently was very overt about how there's going to be a universal ledger where all transactions are tracked, essentially.
I think you have to be open-minded to the fact that perhaps Bitcoin is the reverse Trojan horse to get us all to get onto a giant universal digital ledger.
I believe the next generation for markets, the next generation for securities will be tokenization of securities.
Everything will have a QSIP, everything will have a digital identity, and we'll be able to connect, this Internet of Things, and be able to verifiably, immutably, contain this current state of every token, of everything, into some universal ledger.
As a side note, the EU has been pushing for an asset registry of all the assets of the EU. Now, historically, government censuses were always done shortly before massive confiscation programs. Why else would they need to know about your assets unless they intended to take them? The most basic definition of a government, one must remember, is the right to tax. So when we speak of a universal ledger containing all the world's assets, we are really seeing the attempt at the creation of a world government.
There's a lot of efforts right now, for example, to tokenize rainforests for the purpose of using it in this global carbon market. So that rainforest will also be given a unique identifier, a digital ID.
Another troubling initiative that the Rockefeller Foundation and the New York Stock Exchange came out with in the summer of 2020 was the Intrinsic Exchange Group.
Please welcome Intrinsic Exchange Group to launch of natural asset companies, a new asset class of sustainable enterprises.
They contrived the idea to create a new form of company, a natural asset company, that would claim to own the services that nature produces, such as the hydrologic cycle over North America. This semi-tangible asset would be placed in a company and then floated on the stock exchange.
IEG was founded in order to bring forward a new asset class based on nature, a new form of company. The natural asset company obtains the rights to the ecological services that nature produces.
The real purpose of this is to create more collateral by which the financial sector can expand upon. This will predictably create a financial bubble and crash on proportions not seen before.
It's really a totally insane scheme because they're turning all life, essentially, ecosystem services, lakes, rivers, forests, they're turning it into tradable Wall Street financial products.
These financial parasites claim that the funds raised by this scheme would be used to protect nature.
You could have a universal ledger that contains the state of every single human on Earth, where they are, what color their eyes are, how tall they are, what their body mass is, how much money they have in their bank account, how much land they own, how much carbon they output, how much fuel they've used, how far they've traveled.
And that means every stock, every bond will have its own, basically, QSIP. It'll be on one general ledger. Every investor, you and I, will have our own number, our own identification.
They're essentially justifying, extreme surveillance and all of this as a way for them to engage in unprecedented risk management, really, from their perspective, so that they can continue their rackets unimpeded, but the little people won't be able to engage in risky behavior.
Central bank digital currencies are part of a broader agenda pursued by international financial interests through governments, through NGOs, through the private sector, with the help of the mainstream media.
Welcome, everyone, here in the room and to those tuning in online for this panel discussing central bank digital coins.
The World Economic Forum is a think tank founded by Klaus Schwab in the early 1970s, and it has become an important platform for powerful interest groups to exchange ideas and to set up ideas about forming the future of humanity.
At this pivotal moment, I see several priorities for the global agenda. We must revitalize the global economy and accelerate its transition to net zero.
The states, as we know them today, are aggressive internally and externally, and of course, there's a tendency for governments, for states to form a cartel and to basically harmonize their policies and coordinate their policies.
Has there been ever an example in history where when you give so much power to a small group of people over millions of other people, that this has been consistently used in a benevolent way and resulted in good outcomes?
So a lot of people view the UN sort of as a meeting of the different public sectors and governments of the world, but even the UN leadership have admitted that since at least in the 1990s, if not earlier, there was this move away from the public sector to having it emphasize public-private partnership. And the goal of that model in stakeholder capitalism is that the national government is merely an enabling environment and not a policy-setting entity. The policy setting comes from the level above national governments, and national governments are just the policy enforcers that create the enabling environments for the private sector partners of the UN and the WEF and groups like that.
The push for CBDCs is the final step in a multi-decade program by central planners to increase their power over the people, over countries. This is the ultimate step because the powers of CBDCs are so extraordinary that, I mean, even the worst dictators in past centuries could only have dreamt of having such enormous power over the lives of so many people.
Behind all of these ideas to program money is the idea to central plan the economy, the idea that the government has to intervene more efficiently because market participants do not do something voluntarily. Yeah, of course, you could then just freeze money of people so they could not spend anymore, driving down inflation rate. You can introduce the Schwundgeld, that money loses value, making people to spend their money instead of hoarding it. But once you have digital currencies, you cannot escape. Yeah? There can be no bank runs that people get cash out of the bank, and therefore you can lower interest rates minus 10%, minus 20%.
The U.S. Is on an unsustainable fiscal path. That has been true for a long time. That is associated with our uniquely expensive healthcare delivery system and our aging population.
Historically, war has been the excuse governments have to default on their debts.
The system is going to collapse the same as communism collapsed. It's just not sustainable. And that's actually what Powell is talking about. The system will collapse of its own weight. We don't need guns and revolutions and stuff like that. It's not going to be sustainable. This is the elimination to them of the underground economy. Europe thinks, for example, that they will have increased their taxation collection by 35%. A conservative estimate that these people have is that they will be able to terminate the underground economy and collect 35% more in taxes.
CBDCs right now are being used largely because the financial system is imploding. They've been borrowing money since World War II with no intention of paying anything back. It's getting completely out of control at this stage in the game. 70% of the spending of the national debt is just interest, accumulative interest, because they never pay anything off.
As government spending reaches unsustainable levels, there's no way it could all be paid.
The debt could never possibly be paid back.
A central bank digital currency, I believe, is a threat to liberty in this country because it creates a mechanism for the government to be able to wipe out your bank account or wipe out your dollars if you say or do something that the government disapproves of, as you see in places like China. As you see even happen to the Canadian truckers, the Freedom Envoy, losing access to their financial bank accounts.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoking emergency powers against the truckers who are protesting vaccine mandates. Banks can now freeze their personal accounts.
To better understand what is in store for us with CBDCs, I visited Ottawa, Canada, and interviewed two prominent members of the Canadian Freedom Convoy.
As a former law enforcement officer who spent his entire career ensuring that people's rights and freedoms were upheld, I attend a peaceful protest in the capital city, and although I am here to help and assist in whichever way I can to be helpful to the people of this community, my accounts are frozen simply because I spoke out against the actions of my government. And if that isn't tyranny, I don't know what is.
The trucker convoy started after the federal government in this country held the Canadian truckers up as heroes for about a year and a half, and then decided one day that they must now be vaccinated to cross into the United States.
And it was a group of truckers from all across the country, east, west, every province of the country. And they decided to unify on social media and decide that they had grievances that needed to be discussed with the federal government.
And that was really the seed that was planted, and then it had grown into this big movement of what it was. Who better than to come to Ottawa with a big giant vehicle, sit in front of the House of Commons and not be ignored?
It was a peaceful demonstration. The people that came here, it was surprising. There were tens of thousands of people that attended.
2 border blockades, one in Ontario and one in Alberta, are disrupting hundreds of millions of dollars in Canada-US trade, ranging from cattle to car parts.
The government didn't respond, actually, and they went into hiding.
We have had Canadians' backs.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has refused to meet with protest organizers while butting heads with opposition lawmakers over coronavirus restrictions.
In response to the COVID vaccine mandates, Canadians descended upon the Capitol in peaceful protest. Police invited the truckers into the city and allowed them to set up encampments around the Parliament. But after 10 days of peaceful protesting, a state of emergency was declared. The bank accounts of the key protesters were frozen, and the police descended upon the encampments and made arrests. These account freezers are an example of what can and will be done under a CBDC system.
When the police came in, they were extremely violent. One of the groups that they attacked were Canadian veterans, and they did this right in front of the National War Memorial. The police moved in and beat the hell out of Canadian veterans badly. That wasn't what woke up Canadians. That wasn't what shocked the world. What woke Canadians up was when they went after bank accounts.
By the time we were into week 4, the government declared a state of emergency and invoked what's called the Emergency Measures Act in Canada.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act for the first time in history.
The police will be given more tools to restore order in places where public assemblies can constitute illegal and dangerous activities.
And the Emergency Act gave police authorities and all government officials more power to act on that situation. And one of those first harsh measures was the freezing of a number of bank accounts.
Financial institutions will be authorized or directed to help address the situation by regulating and prohibiting the use of property to fund or support illegal blockades.
They use the authority under something we have here called FinTrack, and FinTrack is supposed to be used for monitoring of domestic and international terrorism financing. So they use the legislation under FinTrack to attack the bank accounts of Canadians who were here peacefully protesting.
The government decided as one of the measures to freeze bank accounts of some of the truckers, some of the attendees, and some of the people that had donated money to this protest. When I say accounts frozen, that means your personal account, your joint accounts with your spouse, your family accounts, they were shut down, and people were completely locked out of being able to fund any of their operations.
The vast majority of people had their bank accounts, including me, frozen. We were never charged. There was never a warrant for our arrest. We've never been convicted of anything.
It was, in effect, an extrajudicial process. Does the government and law enforcement agencies have authority to randomly contact banks and shut down your account without judicial process? And my answer, and the answer of many Canadians, is no. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Bill of Rights says no.
They've deputized the banks to take action against you, to make it almost impossible for you to be a productive member of society, because if you don't have a bank in Canada, how do you get a mortgage, a car payment, go grocery shopping? And we're seeing this move towards everything being digital. If you don't have access to a bank card, how are you supposed to participate in Canadian society?
We're lucky that at this point we still have cash that we can rely on, but if it wasn't for that cash, you have no recourse.
My son has a very complicated medical history, and my credit card was on file with his drugstore to get his heart medication, and we couldn't get his heart medication because my accounts were frozen. You're not allowed to protest in this country, and if you do, they're just going to go after your financial assets without any form of due process.
Following the freezing of the bank accounts, the government moved in to shut down this protest, and it did. It came in heavy-handed and used a substantial amount of force to beat and arrest a number of peaceful protesters into submission to clear the area. That's how it ended. These are mechanisms of control that, once they take hold of you, the ability to revolt or have a revolution will be gone. And it seems like that may be the intention. Don't allow the people to rise up against overreach and over control and authoritative states by implementing a system that can shut people down immediately.
So I think one of the reasons they want this new system that ultimately amounts to a control system is because they see it as the ultimate form of risk management. They essentially want to move to a system that's not unlike the feudal system that existed in medieval Europe. You have, a privileged, untouchable upper class and a low class of serfs. But if you implement a system this way with the technology they're using and all of that, you don't have to worry about peasant rebellions. You can manage the risk of the underclass. So you surveil them constantly. You can turn their money on and off. You can turn their access to services and really anything else on and off as well.
These are mechanisms of control that, once they take hold of you, the ability to revolt or have a revolution will be gone. And it seems like that may be the intention. Don't allow the people to rise up against overreach and over control and authoritative states by implementing a system that can shut people down immediately.
To them, CBDCs is like the pinnacle of what they could achieve, and they're so close to it. But we have to stop it.
The world is currently dividing into Eastern and Western blocs, similar to the Cold War period, with the US and EU on one side and the BRICS countries of Russia, China, Brazil, India, Iran, and Turkey on the other. Now we must all come together, demand an end to these pointless conflicts, and not be gulled into accepting tyrannical systems of control. While the West has increasingly politicized the SWIFT payment system to block Russia, the IMF has quietly positioned itself to offer a wholesale CBDC platform that will rival the SWIFT system.
What we do not yet have is international settlement based on CBDCs.
The United Nations and its agencies such as the IMF and World Bank are controlled by the same people that control the central banks, and they cannot be trusted. The solutions they propose are deceptive and against the interests of humanity. If a CBDC system is put into place, it will devastate the economies of the world.
We are talking about a very dystopian future if we allow central banks to issue central bank digital currencies. Even if the original designers and heads of central banks who are launching this are super well-meaning, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. We just know what human nature is like, and history is the best guide. If you give power to people, power gives temptations. And the reality is most people can't handle those temptations and will succumb to them. And the temptations of power are to do things that are not good for those that are under this power. It will be a completely totalitarian system of such frightening proportions, it's hard to imagine.
I think it would promote revolution, honestly, when people realize they have zero liberty left.
I think the greatest thing at this point is to become familiar with what a CBDC is, understand the difference between cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, blockchain, and a central bank digital currency. I think it's imperative that we stand our ground and that we say no.
When we talk about such a radical change with the creation of a CBDC, that means the government can become involved with every step of your life. Whether it's something mundane like fixing a tax return or something large like trying to track down where you went, the door is open wide for government overreach and abuse. And the government that quickly seems like something that's out of sight and out of mind can quickly dominate your life. And that's something that you should very much be concerned about before it becomes a reality.
And our computer's showing we're heading into a recession from May of 2024 into 2028. Raising taxes, going to CBDCs, all of this stuff will reduce the economic activity, period. War, inflation, stagflation into 2028.
So we're fucked for 4 years.
Yes.
It's important to start this debate from the value of individual or personal freedom. Because look at WHO, look at UN, look at other international institutions, these are full of bureaucrats. They have people who are not elected by the people. And clearly they don't work for the people, but against them. So we need to go back to the basis.
I would recommend people who are opposed to central bank digital currency and the threats that it poses to write their congressman. I think once it's brought on board, once it's brought online, and it becomes a commonly accepted medium of exchange, it's going to be pretty futile to tell people not to use it.
Do we want to live in such a society where a small group of central planners have this extraordinary power over everyone's lives? I mean, there's no freedom. That by definition ends freedom, and then you don't even need to speculate what further horrible thing could happen after this or as a result of this. It's already enough, I think, to realize we must stop this, and that should be high priority. And I think we should go out and organize demonstrations in front of the central banks.
The proposal for a CBDC and this sort of government takeover of finance very much runs in contrast to the founding of the United States. It runs in contrast to the values of the United States. It is the opposite of having a limited government that doesn't get in the way of free people acting. It instead creates an over-expansionary government that restricts the freedom of people. And that is something that could not be more opposite to the founding of this country.
I was born and lived for 11 years in a totalitarian regime, and I don't want to do it anymore. And for as long as I will be in the US office, in the European Parliament, I will be fighting to the end and with all my strength and power against this totalitarian system.
Socialist or communist ideas can only be overcome by ideas of liberalism and capitalism, and so we have to engage in this battle of ideas. I think there's no way around it. And also we have to remind ourselves that there is something like sound economics. We can know that, for instance, socialist and communist experiments don't work, that they bring impoverishment and suffering to the great majority of the people. And we shouldn't make these mistakes which have been made in the past again.
As real money is replaced by programmable money, the economy will revert to barter and a black market will emerge. This will cause inefficiencies and reduce the standard of living. We can expect local government monies and private monies to emerge as a result. Now, in the 1830s and in the 1930s, the federal government of the United States took actions that undermined the national currency. In both periods, cities and private companies issued monies to fill in the gap that the government created through their mistakes. The human need to trade and prosper will always overcome tyranny. It just depends on how inefficient it gets.
We are in a situation where the fiscal budgets are just out of control and will continue to get out of control. So the CBDCs, for example, are a means to impose control to try and retain that power. They see it as the means to collect more money. They think they'll be able to collect more taxes by 35%. These are currencies issued here by the County of Atlanta in New Jersey. These are all from, the 1930s, because there was a shortage of money around. The states and cities and counties will be able to issue their own money, and that's the resolution to a CBDC.
Is that a hopeful message, or?
I think so. That they're not going to survive. CBDC is not going to be what they think they're going to accomplish with it. The government is going to think that they can force everybody into their agenda with a CBDC, and this is the solution to it. You will see private currencies take place, and people will use even gold coins, silver coins, anything from a physical perspective. You can't force people to do something that is against common sense. And that is what they've always done, and that has always failed.
The commitment to employ central bank digital currencies is clear. The question is, will we accept it? What will our reaction be to a government's ability to monitor what we're doing and ultimately control our behavior?
Bureaucracy always wants to increase its powers. And that has been actually literally the history of central banking. They've used every step over the decades to just increase their power more and more and more. In fact, the central bankers have been beneficiaries of every crisis. So they had no incentive to avoid a crisis, because they know after the next crisis we get more power. And the argument has always been, oh wow, we couldn't stop this crisis because we didn't have enough power in this and that and that. And so after that crisis they get that. Now next crisis they will give you another excuse and then tell you why they needed more powers. And this is literally what happened.
I recommend people support your local economies, build relationships, and opt out of these centralized systems as much as you can. As a side note, to close the film, I recently lived through Hurricane Helene. The power, water, internet, and cellular services were knocked out. For over a week, the only way to transact at all was with cash. If cash were not available as a means to trade, a chaotic situation would have turned violent. I interviewed several people at local gas stations, asking them what things would be like if cash were not available. Here's what they had to say.
Well, if we didn't have cash, things would get frustrating, people would get chaotic, there would be fights, it'd just be plumb craziness.
We couldn't use cash, everybody would be losing their minds, going insane a little bit,
If we couldn't use cash right now, it would be a pretty big mess because there's no places that are taking credit cards. So I'm really thankful that we can use cash.
This experience showed me another reason never to get rid of cash. In a severe natural disaster, without cash, full chaos will ensue. Help me share this film and this information, and stay free.
And we're back. I hope you enjoyed that. Somebody's saying, so UK is Brexit. The UK went through Brexit for this very reason. Okay. So anyways, to bring all of this back, okay, to make it make sense. If you're looking at the Five Eyes, that is Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, along with the US. Those are the Five Eyes. They were responsible for the COVID breakout. Okay, we have proof of that. We have also noticed that the companies, not the companies, but the countries that the United States owes so much money to is China, Japan, and UK. So now you can see why Starmer came to see Donald Trump. They want to know where the hell their money is going to be and if anything's coming in. And when Donald Trump says he'd rather have Carney there than Poilievre, it's all show to begin with. But at least with Carney, Carney was here as our head of the Bank of Canada, all part of this scheme. And along with Donald Trump and all of the tech bros and as well as people worldwide. And then Carney had to go to the UK to fix their banking system. So this is where Carney is heavily involved in all of this. Okay. So either way, we're screwed. It doesn't matter because in the end, if you look at who is really controlling the software and the hardware for these cryptos and CBDCs and that, it comes from Israel. Okay, there's only one type of people behind all of this, Israel, and also the tech bros. Okay, so you really have to connect the dots together. And who's going to be making all the money from all the transactions that people are going to have to do? Again, if you, I'm going to show you the next videos, and then it'll come even clearer. Because by what we're seeing is that mid-April is when they're going to be the court case to accept crypto as backed by the United States Treasury will be done. And right now they were able to make sure that it could be controlled. And anyways, how can I say? They're going to make sure that they can control it, okay, and not allow stuff like Bitcoin and all this. Mind you, they already have Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the Amero, and all of a sudden it came back as named Bitcoin. And what the United States did back then is that they launched it in China, and China ended up owning 70% of Bitcoin, and they gave it a Chinese name, right, out of the blue, so they wouldn't say, oh, then that's why you can't find who owns it. But I remember going to Montreal for a meeting of a lot of people around the world. I can't even remember the name of it now, but it was back in 2015, 2016. And anyways, I met somebody by the name of Tiberius. And Tiberius actually helped create the blockchain. And they explained to me what that was. And at the time it was like, oh my God, this is way over my head. But anyways, Tiberius told me that the only ones who invested in it was the United States government, and they invested $300,000 to help them. Okay, so all of this goes way back, and the ones at hand was, again, John Manley and Robert Pastor, and this was all brought in through this North American Union. And you know, we're gonna have to fight like hell, but we can turn all this around for our benefit. Okay. So we can turn this around for our benefit, and you'll have to follow the CPU to find out how and why. But now I'm going to show you another set of videos that I put together so that I had to make them a little bit smaller for the French people so that they can read underneath, okay? And then whatever I'm saying, they'll be able to rewatch, and then the translation will be done. So 1 second here. I'm just going to go back to share screen here. But yeah, it's coming fast. It's coming in April. It's going to be accepted in mid-April in the United States. And it's all because the United States is broke and everybody wants their money back, and they're going to bypass that. So here it is. Okay. Now.
The decisions that he's making are obviously they're bad for American consumers. Tariffs means we're gonna have to pay a lot more. It's bad for our allies, and it's even bad for the wealthy and bad for business. The stock market is really down. And so you might think, well, okay, Donald Trump is insane and he's stupid, but he's also been bought by the wealthy, right? So clearly at some point they're gonna look at the diving market and be like, hey, boy, get back in line. You gotta stop this. It's not really looking like they're gonna do that though. There was this organization of corporate executives, dozens of them. They met at Yale, and there was some like impromptu polling done there. And apparently they don't plan to openly question Donald Trump. Maybe if the market goes down 20%, maybe we'll bring something up. If 1/5 of our market evaporates, that's what they say. So 44% said it would have to fall 20%. 22% said it would have to fall 30% before they'd even try to influence him. 30% of the market gone, Thanos, before they're even willing to be like, hey, this is bad for business. And by the way, you might have added that up, 44 and 30. Well, that's not 100. What about the rest of them? Are they ready to act right now? No, a quarter said it's not their role to push back, like ever, at all. if the economy totally craters, we don't want to get involved. And let me ask you, dear audience, does it feel like corporate CEOs and their lobbying interests have been hesitant to exert their will on government in the past? I don't really feel like that's the case. I feel like they've advocated for things when they thought it was in their interest, even if it screws over all of us. But now all of a sudden with Donald Trump, even though the stock market is cratering, they're not interested in doing anything about it. And that's hard to explain. Like, I can bring up my theory that all of them are just salivating at the idea that you're gonna have this intentional but brief market drop that they can capitalize on and then make a ton of money on the back end. That's one potential explanation. I don't even know what the other explanation is, Francesca, but at least according to these CEOs, we should not expect them to be making calls behind the scenes that help to stem some of this damage.
I mean, this tells you all you need to know about who's going to be feeling the effects of the market recession, right? Of the recession broadly and of tariffs. It's everyday people. It's normal ass people. That is who's gonna be feeling the effects. These business leaders are not scared. If the market goes 20%, oh yeah, that's your retirement fund, but they don't care, right? Because they're gonna be going on to crypto now. I mean, that's the other thing is like, these are the people who are supposedly interested in some kind of market stability. But if now all the gloves are off, the stipulations for insider trading done, the sell-offs, the juking, the whatever market schemes that are used, all those are fine now. It is game on, and no one is gonna come after them for shorting whatever stock they want to short, insider trading whatever they want to insider trade. So it's kind of a golden era if you are a corrupt trader and or if you're a business leader. Like, and again, if the business leaders thought, let's say if it wasn't tariffs, because tariffs are a really terrible idea. Let's say it was Trump initially in his first term, I think he started floating like, look, bring some businesses back, we'll give you incentives. If he was serious about trying to make more, stimulate national industries, he would be doing things like that. He would be, especially with medium businesses and small businesses. The GOP has always been, oh, we're the small businesses. We really believe in small businesses. You know who's gonna suffer right now? Small businesses, the people who cannot just sort of pass the buck on down to their consumers. They're not a big enough brand. They're not, untouchable. And it's going to further concentrate, places like Amazon, Target, Walmart, on and on and on.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And many of them voted for Donald Trump. Many of them voted. By the way, there's stuff that Trump is doing that we had no indication he would do. I didn't know he was going to turn Gaza into a resort or whatever. He did say he was going to do tariffs though. So again, I don't want these businesses to be damaged. I'm not one of those people that's like on blue sky, like, yeah, F them. I hope they go. Like, I'm not interested in that. These are Americans. I don't want them to lose everything. But I'm also not going to pretend that we couldn't see this coming.
Right.
We saw it. We said it. Many people in the audience probably tested the fact that we talk too much about this sort of stuff and we make too many doom and gloom predictions. But we did definitely do that.
This is the crypto EO. We're going to be forming an internal working group to make America the world capital in crypto under your leadership.
Which is really going up, right?
Absolutely.
All right, David, that's for you. Thanks. You find them exciting? They might not be exciting, but they're going to make a lot of money for the country.
Thank you, sir.
And so is David. You have to check him out. There's nobody like this guy. They said, how did you get David Sachs? How did you do that? And he's doing it for the country more than anything else. So we appreciate it, David. Thank you very much.
It's done. Trump just killed America. And while his critics are celebrating, while the media is declaring victory, while even his supporters are starting to doubt, economic suicide, unhinged decisions, destroying the economy, and the GDP growth in just 2 months has slowed significantly, with some estimates suggesting a sharp decline in economic activity in key sectors. But what if they're all being played? What if every headline, every market crash, every chaotic decision is exactly what Trump wants the establishment to think? What if they're all blind to the bigger game being played? Think about it. When was the last time you saw the entire financial establishment, Wall Street, the Federal Reserve, foreign banks, major media, all united in panic over one man's economic decisions? Even Larry Kudlow, Trump's ex-economic advisor, hinted at this on CNBC last month. Disruption is the goal, he said. The establishment hates it, but insiders, they see the method in the madness. They're not panicking because Trump is destroying the economy. They're panicking because he's about to change the entire game. I've been watching all of this unfold just like you, and I've been connecting the dots, and I think I see something most people are missing. I don't have some special White House hotline or anything. This is just me looking at the patterns. But once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. Let me show you what I think everyone is missing. And we'll start with what happened last week. Trump slapped a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports, as Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick recently confirmed.
President Trump previously announced 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. Are those still going to take effect Wednesday, yes or no?
Yes. The media called it reckless. Wall Street called it dangerous. But they're all missing something crucial. This isn't new. Look at the 19th century. America used tariffs to protect its infant industries, outpacing Britain to become an industrial giant.
Well, if you look at the history of tariffs and industrial development, virtually every country that is successfully industrialized has done it by initially protecting their industries by tariffs, other measures, and so on.
Trump's just dusting off a proven playbook. You see, these tariffs aren't just about metal prices. They're not even about trade deficits. They're about completely rewiring how money flows through the global economy. I mean, sure, China might slap tariffs back. They've done it before. But here's the deal. Trump's counting on America becoming less dependent on exports and more self-sufficient. Even during his first term, Larry Kudlow explained the strategy.
I think President Trump has shown all of us that, you have a policy to defend the American economy and the American worker. He's shown us that tough negotiation as a means to the end works. And tough negotiation includes tariff.
Exports are only 12% of our GDP. Compare that to Germany's 47%. We can take the hit and rebuild faster than they can adapt. And think about this. For the last 40 years, we've built our entire economy on one simple formula. Buy cheap goods from overseas, keep interest rates low, and fuel consumption through debt. We didn't just lose manufacturing, we lost the entire ecosystem that supported it. But what happens when you suddenly make it 25% more expensive to import steel and aluminum, with signals of tariffs potentially reaching 20% across the board if his plans fully roll out? Cynics say this takes decades, and true, the full ecosystem won't flip in a year, not even within a term, but it's already starting. Look at TSMC's $40 billion Arizona plant, or steel firms expanding in the Midwest. As CNBC reported last year,
total construction spending in the manufacturing sector has seen an increase of over 106% since November 2021, when the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was passed. That means the U.S. has spent more money building factories than schools, healthcare centers, and even office buildings.
Trump's not building from scratch. He's accelerating what's already in motion. It's not just about one company moving back to America. You're forcing an entire economic ecosystem to rebuild itself. Suppliers, they've got to move closer to production. Raw material producers, they need to scale up. Logistics companies must rebuild domestic networks. Technology firms have to retool for American manufacturing. Dozens of support industries need to spring up around them. This isn't just reshoring, this is rebuilding the entire backbone of American production. But here's where it gets really interesting. These tariffs, they're just the first piece of a much larger strategy. One that becomes crystal clear when you understand the second major shift that's already in motion. Trump's proposed tax cuts. No tax on tips, Social Security benefits, or overtime pay. These aren't just promises. They're the fuel he's planning to ignite a manufacturing boom. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent recently outlined this exact approach at the Economic Club of New York.
Perhaps having
full expensing will create a window, and perhaps having full expensing of factories within that window. So equipment and factories to create American jobs.
Wall Street's yelling inflation. Sure, prices might rise short term, but more domestic production means more supply. Econ 101 says that tames inflation over time. Trump's playing the long game. These tax cuts could unlock serious cash. Eliminating taxes on tips alone could put $10 billion back in workers' pockets annually. That's not pocket change. That's factory building fuel. Will Congress play ball? Maybe not easily, but Trump's got a track record. Look at the 2017 tax cuts. He'll lean on executive orders or rally his base to pressure lawmakers. This isn't about smooth sailing. It's about forcing the change through sheer will. Think about it. When all these companies start moving production back to America, where's the money going to come from? To build new factories, to rebuild supply chains, to hire American workers, to recreate entire industries from scratch. This is where these tax cuts become brilliant. By freeing up billions in capital, Trump isn't just giving people more spending money, he's creating the fuel for the biggest manufacturing renaissance in American history. But here's what most people haven't connected yet. These tax cuts, combined with the tariffs, are pushing us towards something we haven't seen in 150 years, a complete transformation in how Americans are taxed. Under the current system, you get taxed heavily when you earn money, which encourages people to earn less and companies to produce elsewhere. But under this new system that's taking shape, you get taxed when you spend money, especially on imported goods. This creates three massive shifts in behavior. First, you encourage saving and investment. Why? Because the less you consume, the less you're taxed. Suddenly, that new imported car comes with a hefty tariff tax. But investing in American companies building domestic factories, that becomes more attractive. Second, you create what economists call local economic multipliers. When that manufacturing comes back, it's not just factory jobs. It's engineering jobs to design the facilities, construction jobs to build them, transportation jobs to move materials, service jobs to support the workers, and dozens of other ripple effects throughout the local economy. But there's a third piece to this puzzle that's making economists nervous, something that, at first glance, seems to contradict everything that we've talked about. Everyone expected Trump to slash government spending. After all, that was a big part of his campaign promises. But look what's actually happening. Instead of slashing spending across the board, Trump's floating targeted investments, like workforce programs, to jumpstart this transformation, even if it bucks the traditional conservative playbook. On the surface, this looks like complete chaos. How can you rebuild American manufacturing, transform the tax system, and keep government spending high? But what if, just like a chess master sacrificing his queen, this apparent contradiction is actually the most brilliant move of all? Right now, the government makes up 30% of our entire GDP. That's nearly 1/3 of our entire economy. And most people think Trump's ignoring this problem. But here's what they're missing. We're standing at a crossroads where three possible scenarios could play out. Scenario one, the pessimists could be right. The rapid shift triggers a recession. Companies struggle to rebuild supply chains. Prices spike before domestic production catches up. We see a painful transition where both businesses and consumers feel the squeeze. Scenario two, the optimists could be right. The combination of tariffs and tax cuts triggers a manufacturing renaissance. American innovation kicks in, leading to more automated, efficient production. We see a boom in high-paying jobs and domestic investment. But here's scenario three, and this is what I think most people are missing. We could see both happen simultaneously. Consider that certain sectors of the economy are going through serious pain while others experience unprecedented growth. Critics say this will spark chaos. Price spikes, a recession. Fair point. Former Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned,
if we were to compromise the credit rating of the United States and even worse, to default on the debt, I think that would have an adverse impact on the dollar's use as a reserve currency.
But chaos is the point. Every major economic shift, like the Industrial Revolution, came with pain before gain. The difference? Trump's betting on American grit and innovation to outpace the squeeze. Look at steel towns already seeing investment spikes. Pain in some sectors is birthing growth in others. While the GDP has slowed significantly, we're also seeing certain industries and regions experiencing explosive growth. What we're we're witnessing isn't random policy chaos. It's a chance to witness a sequenced reboot of America's economic engine. The mainstream media just doesn't want you to see it. So here's the master plan in 3 steps. Step 1, tariffs force production home. Step 2, tax cuts fund the rebuild. Step 3, strategic government spending bridges the gap until private industry takes over. When you see it laid out like this, suddenly all the unhinged decisions start looking like calculated moves in a much bigger game. This kind of economic transformation creates what I call opportunity pockets, specific areas and industries where wealth is being created while other areas struggle. The key to not just surviving but thriving in this environment is understanding where these pockets are forming. So here's what all this means for you right now. If you're watching this video, chances are you're feeling what millions of other Americans are feeling. That knot in your stomach every time you check your retirement account. That anxiety about whether your savings will mean anything in 6 months. That frustration of watching prices go up while your money seems to buy less and less. And let's be honest, the traditional advice isn't cutting it anymore. Just keep your money in the market. Wait it out. Trust the system. Just this week, the CEO of BlackRock and the CEO of JP Morgan met in Washington with lawmakers to discuss the collapse of the 401k. The system, it's fundamentally changing right before our eyes. Here's the reality. During massive economic transformations like what we're seeing right now, there are really only 2 types of people. Those who get crushed by the change and those who position themselves to profit from it. While most financial advisors are telling you to sit tight and hope for the best, I'm doing something different. Something that's already helping regular people protect and grow their wealth during these uncertain times. I'm flying a small group of people out to Vegas. Yeah, flight and hotel, that's on me. For an intensive 2-day event. You can get the full details at intensive2025.com.
Yeah, we're not picking favorites, obviously, except I will say this. We do think Bitcoin is special, and I can get into the reasons
explain why. That's a great thing, yeah.
Well,
explain
I mean, Bitcoin's the original cryptocurrency. It's the first one. It's the only one that doesn't have an issuer, right? It's very decentralized. It's, in crypto, they call this the Immaculate Conception. We don't really know how it got here. We don't know who Satoshi is. It's almost mystical, you would say.
Yes.
It's the most valuable one. It has a $2 trillion market cap, and it's the most secure. It's never been hacked, right? So we're now, over 15 years into this journey, and there's been a lot of people who've been skeptical along the way, and there's been a lot of ups and downs, but here it is. I mean, I remember back in 2011, I think it's the first time I bought a Bitcoin. I think it was at $120. Now it's at $90,000.
The cryptocurrency market has been hit by another bout of extreme volatility, causing a 7% drop in Bitcoin's price, a 9% drop for Ethereum, and XRP and double-digit reductions for Cardano and Dogecoin in less than 24 hours. Several interrelated factors contributed to this downturn. First, there are concerns about a potential global trade war, stemming from President Donald Trump's imposition of tariffs on imports from certain countries, including China, Canada, and Mexico, the United States' 3 largest trading partners. The tariffs have introduced new economic uncertainties, which were further heightened when the president refused to comment on whether these tariffs would lead to a recession in the U.S. during an interview with Fox News. In addition, data released on March 9th indicates that China's consumer price index fell at the sharpest pace in 13 months in February, marking the 30th consecutive month of producer price deflation. This raised alarms about global economic growth, prompting investors to shift towards safer assets. On the technical front, investors appeared to have been securing profits ahead of significant events like the White House Crypto Summit. While many uncertainties still lie ahead for the global economy and the cryptocurrency market, experts are certain that the tailwinds far outweigh the headwinds, meaning prices have a more than decent chance of making a significant recovery in the coming weeks. White House AI and crypto czar David Sachs recently discussed President Trump's strategic Bitcoin reserve and digital asset stockpile as one of those tailwinds, highlighting how he expects the much-anticipated development to impact the crypto market in the months and years ahead. As we bring you clips from Sachs' latest appearance on the All In podcast, please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the video.
The president has lived up to one of his campaign promises. This is not something new. Remember, you go all the way back to his national speech during the campaign, and he reiterated this many times, that he wanted to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Sometimes he called it a digital asset stockpile. What we've ultimately done here is both. He also, in his week 1 EO on crypto, you guys remember I came on the show to talk about that. He asked our president's working group on digital assets to evaluate the idea of a reserve or stockpile. And we made a recommendation, and this administration is moving at tech speed. It's really great to work for an administration where you can actually get things done and things move quickly. We made our recommendation, and then we worked with the lawyers to implement it, and the president signed it last night. But this is fully consistent with everything he's always said. Yeah, we're not picking favorites, obviously, except I will say this. We do think Bitcoin is special, and I can get into the reasons
explain why. That's a great thing, yeah.
Well, I mean, Bitcoin's the original cryptocurrency. It's the first one. It's the only one that doesn't have an issuer, right? It's very decentralized. It's, in crypto, they call this the Immaculate Conception. We don't really know how it got here. We don't know who Satoshi is. It's almost mystical, you would say.
Yes.
It's the most valuable one. It has a $2 trillion market cap, and it's the most secure. It's never been hacked, right? So we're now, over 15 years into this journey, and there's been a lot of people who've been skeptical along the way, and there's been a lot of ups and downs. But here it is. I mean, I remember back in 2011, I think it's the first time I bought a Bitcoin. I think it was at $120. Now it's at $90,000. Again, there have been all sorts of wild swings along the way, but this thing just keeps chugging along. And you can think of that $2 trillion market cap as like a $2 trillion bug bounty. If there was a way to hack this, there's every incentive in the world. And by hack, I mean like to double spend, create basically a counterfeit Bitcoin, I guess would be the way for people to think about it. And
it is a miracle it hasn't been compromised. I think we can all say that.
Well, I don't know if it's a miracle. I think it's exceptional design.
Sure.
And so I think what you could say is that it's been tested in a very robust way, and there's been every incentive to basically break the encryption, and it continues to chug along. And so I think the price has gone up as the protocol has gotten more acceptance. And this is another point, is that Bitcoin's the most widely accepted as a store of value throughout the world.
Yeah.
So we do believe it should be treated special. Now, that being said, we're also creating the digital asset stockpile. So the reserve is just Bitcoin. The goal is long-term preservation. Think of it as like a digital Fort Knox for digital gold. We want to put the digital gold in there. We want to keep it secure. We never want to sell it. That's the goal of the reserve. And you're right that we've made the mistake in the past of selling this stuff. At one point in time, we had about 400,000 Bitcoin on the federal balance sheet. We sold roughly half of that for something like $360 million total. If we had held all of that, it would be worth, just that the portion we sold would be worth over 17 billion. So we made this mistake of prematurely selling Bitcoin when we should have held it. We don't want to make that mistake with regard to the rest of it. We think there's around 200,000 coins left on the federal balance sheet, but the truth is that nobody knows because we've never done a proper audit. So part of what this executive order provides is that we're going to do for the first time a government-wide accounting of the digital assets that we actually have. So,
and if digital assets emerge in some department, I don't know, the FBI seizes some, the CIA seizes some, I don't know which organization winds up having them, they're going to be legally required to report that and then put them in the reserve.
Well, they'll be legally required to report it, and then they'll go in the reserve if there's a final adjudication. So, obviously, if those coins could go back as restitution to victims, or if the person who they were seized from wins their court case and gets them back, they're not going to go into the Federal Reserve. But if there's been a final adjudication and a final forfeiture, yes, those will go into the reserve. Anyway, that's Bitcoin. Okay, so then you got the stockpile. Let me just talk about that. So first of all, like I said, we don't know exactly what digital assets the federal government has. I've seen reports that it might have, for example, 50,000 ETH, which is Ethereum. But again, we need to get to the bottom of that. When we figure out exactly what the assets are, we're going to move them into the digital stockpile. The purpose of the stockpile is responsible stewardship. It's a place for safekeeping. It's a centralized, you could say, account under the direction of the Secretary of the Treasury. And the Secretary of the Treasury will figure out how to maximize the values of these holdings. Now, there's a couple of important differences between stockpile and reserve. So one is the reserve, the executive order actually provides that the Secretary of the Treasury will not sell the Bitcoin. Okay, we're prohibited from selling the Bitcoin. There's no such prohibition with respect to the stockpile. If the Secretary of the Treasury decides that it's in the long-term interest of the U.S. to rebalance the portfolio or change the portfolio, the Secretary has the discretion to do that. That's largely fair. I mean, look, I think that the stockpile should be subject to good portfolio management, right? And fortunately, we have a Secretary of the Treasury who is an extremely successful former hedge fund manager. So he's going to figure out the best way to manage these assets. And we give him the flexibility to do portfolio management. Whereas,
and
like
he
I
has
said,
to live and die with what he does. He has to make those decisions, and that's going to be, part of how he's evaluated by the president. So hopefully he's going to be sharp about that.
right. But the reserve is different, right? The reserve is just digital Fort Knox. Now, there's one other important difference between stockpile and reserve. So with respect to reserve, the EO provides that the secretaries, that I'm talking about Treasury and Commerce, they're allowed to figure out strategies to accumulate more Bitcoin for the reserve if those strategies are budget neutral and don't cost the taxpayer anything. Okay. So it's possible that we could, I'm not saying that we will, but it authorizes them to acquire more Bitcoin if they can figure out a way to do it that doesn't impact the federal budget or the deficit or taxpayers, right?
President Trump's tariff plans are undoubtedly one of the biggest issues impacting the global economy and financial markets today. So far, his administration has implemented and proposed several significant tariff measures affecting key U.S. trading partners. On March 4, 2025, the U.S. enforced 25% tariffs on most imports from Canada and Mexico. This action aims to pressure these nations to enhance efforts against illegal immigration and drug trafficking, particularly fentanyl, into the United States. In response, Canada imposed 25% tariffs on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods, with plans to expand this to $125 billion. Mexico has indicated intentions to announce its countermeasures, including potential tariffs. On February 10, 2025, President Trump declared 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports to the U.S., eliminating previous country-specific exemptions. These tariffs are scheduled to take effect on March 12, 2025. There has been much speculation about the motive behind these developments. However, the administration asserts that these measures are necessary to protect national security and support domestic metal industries. During the podcast, billionaire investor Chamath Palihapitiya and entrepreneur and businessman David Friedberg weigh in on the issue, highlighting why they believe this is a much-needed move for the U.S. economy.
I think that this is the first week where I've seen the first real schism in how people are interpreting what's actually happening. I think that Trump and Elon were very much in a honeymoon period until this week. And I think there was the benefit of the doubt. But what I saw on X was a real divergence where, on the one hand, there were people that were basically saying, Doge is deranged, Elon is crazy, Trump is lighting the world on fire in one camp, and the other camp saying he's sticking to the plan. And when I thought about this a little bit, if you went back to November the 5th, I do think it's important to remember that we were at this moment where you had this fork in the road and you had all these important issues where I think the best way to generalize it was that the Democrats believed that the lines should continue to be blurred. So whether that was on gender or race or merit versus some other immutable trait or fiscal and monetary policy, things were just getting more and more blurred. And then Trump and Elon basically showed up and said, actually, we want to refocus and we want to make the lines very visible and clear on all those dimensions. And a majority of Americans voted that in. But I think what you're starting to see now is the difficulty in actually implementing that plan. And what I mean specifically is tariffs are very nuanced and complicated. On the one hand, there's these short-term wins. There's these impacts. You could deem them positive or negative to the dollar. There's impacts to U.S. bonds. There's impacts to U.S. bond markets. There's impacts to how countries deal with foreign reserves. And then there's this impact that happens when the markets react to a tariff. And then Trump takes that off the table and then they snap back. So you have this weird set of boundary conditions right now. So I think right now we're in the very difficult part of sorting through what the long-term implications are. And I can get to some of them later, but I think that's where we are. I think what tariffs allow us to do is rebase the long-term reliance on the US dollar. It allows us to rebase our ability to fund our own deficits, and it allows us to rebase the long-term ability for American companies to be economically vibrant.
I don't sit inside of Trump's head, and I don't have any direct line of communication to folks that are constructing the theory and the policy. If I were to say, what's the most masterful plan in an optimistic way of what could be going on here? What's the master plan? I would kind of craft it as follows. Tariffs aren't being done in isolation. They're being done along with a coordinated policy effort to reduce income taxes and another policy effort to reduce government spending. So those are three actions, three legs on a stool. So tariffs, reduced income taxes, reduced government spending. And they are related to each other. They're related to each other because if we increase tariffs, one element of that is that to import products is more expensive. For example, I buy LED lights in my greenhouse, and the price of the LED lights just went up by 25%. This week, I actually spoke with the CEO of an LED company, and I was like, why don't you guys make the LEDs here? And there starts to become a crossover point where it actually makes economic sense for the company to make the LEDs here instead of sourcing them from Asia. And there's 100,000 examples of this. When the industrial supply chain goes to the lowest part of production, it's going to end up offshoring when there's no tariffs. And if there are tariffs, then you start to do production here. So you're increasing both kind of security for the US supply chain, but also increasing demand and creation of a workforce. Now, I think that the income tax piece is critical here because in order to make the capital available to build that industry here, we need to unleash capital. And reducing of income taxes, the economic theory would be that capital will now flow into these entrepreneurial activity, these opportunities that have emerged, where suddenly it makes sense for me to make textiles, to make metals, to make materials, to make cars, to make all this stuff here in the United States that I otherwise wouldn't be making. So both the corporate and the personal income tax, by reducing it, unleashes capital that instead of going into the government, it now goes into the private sector, into building businesses.
Okay.
I think that there's another theory about this, which is as you drop the income tax, one of the kind of key theories that I've heard spoken about a lot lately, and I think we're going to hear about it a lot more this year, is trying to get the United States to move away from an income taxation model to a consumption taxation model. So effectively what the tariffs do is there's a tax for you buying certain things. So now instead of getting taxed when you earn money as an individual, you get taxed when you spend money. And some people think that that's both a more fair system and a more kind of economically vibrant system because that will drive investment in the things that people want to produce because the money's going into production. So
do you think that, Friedberg? I'm curious.
I don't know. It's a really interesting economic theory. I mean, I am not opposed to seeing some sort of an experiment play out where we look at a shift from income taxation to consumption taxation and see if it actually does have an effect on economic growth and productivity. It has not been done in 150 years. There's a lot of economic theorists on both sides of the equation saying this does work or it doesn't work.
Okay.
And let me just say one last thing. By reducing government spending, we are moving workers from the government into the private workforce. So as those new industries pop up, as those investments start to get made in building new industry onshore, where are the workers going to come from? Remember, the government's 30% of the US GDP today. So if that's not a great way to invest money, maybe the private industry is better at investing money and employing people. That will unleash the workforce and it will counterbalance the inflation that we're experiencing. So there's a lot of inflation because of tariffs. And by reducing government spending, that's the offset to inflation. So those three actions, I think, are three legs of a stool, and they actually are all interrelated to one another. So that would be my grand master theory of what might be going on.
Like Friedberg, ARK Invest founder and CEO Cathie Wood has also suggested that President Trump's recent tariff policies may be a precursor to significant tax cuts in the United States. During his first term, President Trump enacted the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TCJA, of 2017, which reduced the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21% and introduced individual tax cuts scheduled to expire in 2025. The administration is now considering extending these individual tax cuts and further reducing the corporate tax rate to 15% for companies manufacturing products domestically. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has indicated that implementing reciprocal tariffs could generate approximately $700 billion annually, potentially eliminating the national deficit, reducing interest rates, and stimulating economic growth. This approach aims to shift the tax burden from American citizens to foreign entities through increased tariffs, thereby facilitating substantial individual tax cuts, or even the elimination of federal income taxes. Kathy has likened the current economic climate to the early 1980s, when President Reagan's tax and interest rate cuts led to substantial economic growth. She believes that Trump's proposed tax reductions and regulatory rollbacks could turbocharge the economy even more than during the Reagan era. Do you agree with this assertion? Please share your thoughts, comments, and observations in the comments section below. Also, ensure you like.
President Trump hosting the first ever White House crypto summit, vowing to stop the government's war on a valuable asset.
Last year, I promised to make America the Bitcoin superpower of the world and the crypto capital of the planet, and we're taking historic action to deliver on that promise, as you know, around the table. Yesterday, I signed an executive order officially creating our strategic Bitcoin reserve, and this will be a virtual Fort Knox for digital gold to be housed within the United States Treasury. That's a big thing, Scott.
Here to discuss, Kevin O'Leary, chairman of O'Leary Ventures. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Can you just explain what this means? This is a big deal to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Why is it so important, and why didn't the previous administration do something like this?
The most important part of this whole announcement and Friday itself was signaling that the regulatory environment is going to change on all things crypto. As you know, the last administration under Gensler at the SEC, the way policy was being administered was through litigation, trying to interpret the existing laws into the new technologies of Bitcoin and all the other technologies in crypto. And it was a mire of just lawsuits. That's changing. That was the signal. And the Bitcoin reserve is actually, more importantly, about that, but there's $17 billion in it right now that's been seized. What is being signaled by President Trump is that that's going to be kept by Treasury as an asset. And he's not adding to it right now, but that, and a lot of the industry wanted to see some percentage of assets kept in Bitcoin. But that's not as important as what he did in signaling regulation. That's stack number one. Number two, and this was very important, is that we have been debating the American dollar and digitizing the American dollar now for almost 5 years. One act was from Gillibrand called the Stablecoin Act, and more recently the Genius Act with Senator Haggerty. These acts are going to merge. They're going to be co-authored. And digitizing the American dollar is probably the most important and largest aspect of crypto we could do, because every commodity on earth is denominated by the American dollar. We don't want the Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans and South American countries trying to come up with an alternative, which they are talking about. We want the dollar to rule, and this is how you start. It's the largest market. It's a multi-trillion-dollar market, and this is the lowest hanging fruit. Bipartisan bill going to be hitting the floor soon. I totally support it. Real action was not on Friday. It was Thursday night. In dinners being held all over town by all these crypto people from around the world coming into Washington. I went there. That's the signal I got. So go Gillibrand, go Haggerty, merge it together, get it through. Lots of opposition from Elizabeth Warren on this one, but I think her party's going to abandon her on it. We want the American dollar digitized.
Yeah, this is very important. What do you say, Kevin, very quickly, to investors out there? Is this a good time to invest in cryptocurrency?
You know, cryptocurrency should be thought of in two buckets. One, you have speculation in the price of Bitcoin. Everybody's been tracking that from 16,000 to over 100,000 and down 10% a day. You need a lot of fortitude. You need a stomach to handle that. But it should not be your entire portfolio. It's no different than owning gold. I own a 5% weighting in gold in my portfolios, and I own a 5% weighting in crypto. They've both done very, very well over the last year and been hedges against inflation, which is not bad. But what we're really talking about, and what the president is signaling here, is let's bring the people who develop these technologies back to the United States, because we've chased them out through litigation. And so he's signaling to them, come home, let's develop digital payment systems like we talked about digitizing the American dollar, because that's a great idea. It's a signal, and it's powerful, and the world hears it.
The world hears it, and we're excited. It's an exciting time. And Kevin O'Leary, thank you so much for your insights to this today.
Take care. Everybody that's involved in crypto knows volatility is the hallmark of this asset class. I mean, the vol on Bitcoin alone, the granddaddy asset, is extraordinary. So if you can't handle this, don't bother investing in it. I think by now everybody's learned that.
Chairman of O'Leary Ventures, Kevin O'Leary, has been watching how global politics and macroeconomic waves are impacting crypto markets. From the White House Crypto Summit to tariffs on Canada, Mexico, China, and more, how will the economy react to policy, and what will that mean for Bitcoin, stablecoins, and real-world assets? Kevin O'Leary joins the show now to weigh in. Kevin, welcome to Markets Daily.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Of course. Well, great to have you back. A lot happening in the crypto markets, but also on a macroeconomic level. Just tell me, what are you watching this morning?
So on the crypto space, I think what was important over the last week, really, starting on Thursday night, was the fact that the White House is signaling a different stance on regulation. I mean, we didn't get what we wanted if you're a crypto enthusiast for a reserve, because really they're not adding to it. They're just keeping what was actually in it already, about 17 billion worth of Bitcoin. But it's the policy stance that matters the most. And so to break it down, what occurred is on Thursday night, a lot of dinners happened before the White House meeting. So a lot of the business was done the evening before. And I think there's three stacks to think about if you're a crypto investor. Number one is, what gets regulated first? That's a positive thing. So is it going to be stable coins? Is it going to be a broader Bitcoin? Is it going to be tokenization of equities? These are all ideas floating around. And so Senator Haggerty and Jill DeBrandt, you may be aware, have been working on stable coins backed by the US dollar for almost 5 years now. And so we originally had the Jill DeBrandt Stablecoin Act, and more recently the Genius bill coming out of Haggerty. What's going to happen is these are going to merge. This policy is going to turn into one, as I like to say, one big, beautiful bill. And it's going to be specifically for a stable coin backed by the US dollar. And why that's positive is that that's the low-hanging fruit. That's something can actually pass. It's bipartisan. The only person objecting to it right now is Elizabeth Warren, and she is probably going to be ignored by her party on this one. And we need to get a bill done. We've been talking about getting bills through Congress forever on crypto. Let's get one done. And this one looks like it can happen. And after that, the floodgates will open.
Now, you mentioned the White House signaling a regulatory shift when it comes to crypto, but the markets really didn't react to Thursday night's meetings. They didn't react to Friday's announcement. And I believe when I checked Bitcoin this morning, it dipped below $80,000, or maybe that was last night. The time is just kind of, time is one thing for me these days. Why do you think that the markets are not having a positive reaction to this signal?
Well, I think they're reacting the same way the overall market. Equity markets, bond markets are very volatile right now because of all of the policy changes going on, both domestically and internationally, as being debated through tariffs, everything else. And there was a lot of excitement in the crypto market prior to the news. So buy on the rumor, sell on the news is applying here as well. But everybody that's involved in crypto knows volatility is the hallmark of this asset class. I mean, the vol on Bitcoin alone, the granddaddy asset, is extraordinary. So if you can't handle this, don't bother investing in it. I mean, I think by now everybody's learned that.
Let's talk about tariffs for a second here. Another big macroeconomic factor that has affected crypto markets, but markets beyond crypto. Talk to me about how you're viewing the tariffs that the US are putting on both Canada, Mexico, China, potentially Europe in the future. That's what the president is saying. How do you expect these to play out, and how do you think it's going to affect how investors are looking at the markets?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the other countries, because it's not just Canada and Mexico. Every single country is on notice that had tariff schedules. Some of these schedules are as old as the Second World War. And so what's going to happen over the next year, probably 2 years, let's just take one that I'm very familiar with because I invest on both sides of the border, Canada and the United States. People are unaware that the Canadians have tariffs on American butter and sugar and other commodities as high as 240%. And so there's two types of tariffs going on here. One is supposedly in punishment for fentanyl coming over the border, but that's masking the real issue. What the current administration, what the Trump administration wants is reciprocal tariffs. So, which I don't think are unreasonable, because it's not just Canada. It's going to be England on ag goods and Germany and India on cars and all kinds of other tariffs that are imbalanced. So if you're a Canadian and you want to tariff Vermont butter at 240%, they're going to tariff your butter at 240%. And this begins what I consider to be a very healthy negotiation. And in the case of Canada, it's not just north-south. The Canadians tariff each other province to province. There's $200 billion worth of commerce that doesn't happen in Canada because you can't sell wine from BC in Quebec. And so I think this is very healthy. I mean, obviously, Canadians don't like being told they're the 51st state, et cetera. But that was really more of a problem between the relationship of Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump, which was toxic and non-functional. And I mean, and thank goodness Trudeau is gone as of this morning. He's ancient history. And now there's new leadership in the Liberal Party. And the Canadians will probably call an election by the end of March to see who's going to actually be prime minister for the next 4 years. So, and what happened last night in electing Carney, who's well known around the world, but not so well known by Canadians, he's not even an elected official. This is almost, it's unprecedented. His own party, the Liberals, not a single candidate that was running for prime minister got more than single digits. That party is well, there's no other word to use, is hated by the Canadian people right now. And so Freeland, the finance minister, she got 8%. Mm-hmm. She was so incompetent in the eyes of Canadians, they wouldn't want him near the government again. And Trudeau was obviously what happened to him. He got wiped out. But it's a new time, and Carney has to build his case, and let's see what he has. I think he'll have trouble because he's doubling down on carbon taxes, and that's what got the Canadian economy in trouble in the first place. So he may have a problem with that.
Well, dig a little bit deeper into that for me. The Liberal Party now being led by Mark Carney. What does that mean for the Canadian economy should the Liberals win this next election?
Well, what's happening in Canada is very similar to what happened just a few months ago in the United States. There's a sweep towards common sense. And the Canadians are pretty frustrated because their economy was absolutely decimated by every metric you can measure. GDP growth, flat. Foreign capital invested per capita, down 71%. Canadian pension plans no longer invest in Canada. They can't. Under the Trudeau government, they put in place environmental policies that stop the issuance of permits for any projects, including pipelines or mining or developing any kind of energy infrastructure. All of that collapsed. And so Carney has to go convince Canadians that he's brand new and the Liberals should stay in power. I think Canadians want the pause that refreshes, and that occurs. I mean, 10 years of Liberals and the complete decimation of the Canadian economy, as measured by the Canadian dollar, lost 41% of its value during the reign of Trudeau. So Canadians, technically 25% of the population now lives in poverty. Now, it's really hard to come out and say, look, I'm Carney saying, don't worry, I'll fix all this and we'll just keep all the Liberal policies, including carbon tax, in place. I don't think it's going to work. I mean, we'll see what happens, but most likely he loses to the Conservatives, who are saying we're just going to get a spatula and scrape everything out of there, which is what Trump said. So it's the same kind of momentum that's occurring. And you'll know that probably by the end of April. It's going to happen pretty quickly. And that may be a healthy thing. Then whoever is the new leader of Canada can go to Washington and start negotiating what is effectively becoming NAFTA 3, being negotiated ahead of schedule. And I think that's a healthy thing. I think that's a good thing. All the rhetoric, remarkably, right now, there's no leadership in Canada. So all the premiers of the provinces are sitting in Washington with their staffs negotiating. And it's unusual because Alberta has a different mandate there around energy than Ontario has. Ontario's car parts. They have no leadership yet. And so these are very difficult negotiations. And by the way, never even mentioned in these negotiations is sovereignty. So this is just rhetoric the press is running with. Canada is not for sale. Canadian people don't want to sell it, but they are interested in the economic union, common currency, maybe Euro type passport and no tariffs. Very attractive. They'll be part of the negotiations.
Now, that's Canada. Let's come back to tariffs. Let's talk about the globe because there are other countries involved here. How do you see these tariffs shaking out? And I have to ask you this question again. What does that mean for broader markets? And more narrowly, what does that mean for crypto markets over, I guess, let's say the rest of 2025?
It's a reset. It's a global reset. Including China. China's a different situation because they have a lot of other pressures coming at them. Well, let's just deal with the rest of the world ex-China. Start there. Germany, England, India, and others have put tariffs on for decades on all kinds of different products. They're protecting their own domestic businesses, whether it be agricultural in England or cars in Germany and technology in India as well. So what Trump is saying is, look, case by case, we're going to go reciprocal. You tariff us, we're going to tariff you. And I think that leads to a healthy negotiation. That's a positive thing long term. That does cause lots and lots and lots of instability. And it really focuses on commodities that we simply don't have in the United States. For example, potash. There's zero potash in the United States. That's all sitting in a province called Saskatchewan. It's not a good idea to tariff that when you don't have any of it in the US and you have to have it for farming. So that'll get carved out probably. Energy. The lowest cost import energy to the United States is from Alberta. It's a $13 a barrel discount. Probably not a good idea to tariff that. And I might add something which is kind of interesting. The only premier to go visit Trump in Mar-a-Lago before he became president, when it was no presidential record keeping, so it was an open, free-form narrative, was Danielle Smith, the premier of Alberta. And she got tremendous heat for it in Canada. Oh my goodness, she got abused. She's the winner. She ended up negotiating a 10% tariff versus 25. So she doesn't look so stupid anymore. And I think that's what people have realized. If you want to get a deal done with Trump, you got to go meet him. You got to sit down at the table. He's that kind of negotiator. Foreign leaders have been lining up at the White House ever since, some with mixed results. Zelensky, not so good, but others coming away saying, okay, we have to negotiate. So all these countries are going to negotiate. Now let's talk about China. That's a different kettle of fish. China is getting scrutinized not only on tariffs, but also around IP law and constitutional law in an attempt for the U.S. to level the playing field. There's a bill that Graham Lindsay is bringing against what's called the secret share or the golden share, depending what you want to call it, where there's a pref share in Chinese listed companies in the U.S. that gives basic effective control to the CCP. That's not okay. That's against the laws of the United States. And what he's recommending with this bill is let's delist all these companies. So that's $800 billion worth of market cap. That's one issue. There are hearings on April 9th about pension investing. It's going to take place, Senate hearings. I'll be attending those. I've been asked to testify, and you know how it works with the Senate. It's a friendly ask in the beginning, but it's something you can't say no to. Obviously, I do business in China, and what's being attempted in these hearings is to talk about what it's going to take to level the playing field. Remember, the Chinese joined the WTO in 2000 and have never abided by the rules since then. They steal IP, there's all kinds of issues. I think the Chinese people are fantastic. They've given so much to the world's culture and science over the millennia. But the problem now is their government. And so, you know, you've heard a lot of rhetoric about who's holding cards. The U.S. economy is the largest on earth. And if the Chinese want to become the 8th in the G8, they're going to have to play by the rules. And so this negotiation is coming at them legally. It's coming at them through tariffs. They're in a different bucket than any other country.
I guess I got to ask you, given that you've been asked to testify, given the fact that you do business with the Chinese, what do you think it's going to take to level the playing field?
I just want whatever rules we have here that I have to abide by, I want the Chinese to abide by the same to get access to the U.S. market. So if I have to comply with listing laws when I list a company on NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange, and I have to be transparent, I can't put a golden share on the cap table and not disclose it. I have to be compliant. I have to have complete transparency in my accounting. The Chinese do not. Then why are they allowed to list when I have to pay the fees and they don't? So that's, I think, a level playing field. I want to be able to protect my IP in the Chinese market. They get to litigate in the US. I can't litigate in China. So I want to compete. I really want to sell into the Chinese market. It's the largest market on earth and growing very quickly. I want to do business with them on a level playing field. The same rules everybody else has to live by. And that's what I want, and that's what millions of other investors want. And so, and I think Xi knows that it's a huge opportunity for him to play by the rules and become a major player. Now, he may not want to do that, but it's hard to understand why, because the world will just get more and more and more punitive. And I think trade wars hurt everybody long term. I understand that for negotiating tactics, but long term, they're expensive.
I want to come back to the White House crypto summit that we started the conversation with. I know that you were in Washington. I know we talked a little bit about the stablecoin bill. What are the conversations that you were having at the dinner table? What were folks talking about? What are they excited about when it comes to the crypto industry?
Well, the most interesting is the largest market, and we've talked about the FX market. So if we had a digital dollar, it would be really useful because it would be much faster and less expensive to do transactions globally. And so we need a stablecoin act. We need it now. And I think that will occur because it's bipartisan. You got to understand something that's disruptive to the money center banks. They make so much money in FX trading, a multi-trillion-dollar market. I wouldn't have to, I'm a watch guy. I own a lot of watches, and I support watchmaking in Switzerland. And I find young watchmakers and I buy watches from them. They make piece uniques for me. I have to transfer US dollars to Switzerland, sometimes as much as 100,000 at a time. And just try doing that. Just try doing that without being considered a drug dealer to start with, getting all of the know your client stuff worked out, the transference of the dollar and then the conversion to Swiss franc, the amount of time it takes, and the fees are outrageous.
Yeah. The amount of fees, I've been there. Yeah.
So I mean, if we had a stable coin, and the watchmaker would accept it, and they would if it was, approved by regulators, I could transfer 100,000, let's say USDC, the one I use, and I have to disclose I'm a shareholder in Circle. But I would transfer that in about half a second at 2 to 3 basis points of fees, a fraction of what it costs me to do this now. So it's important. So that's one big thing discussed. The other one, and this is a very interesting narrative, the tokenization of securities on the blockchain. So if this would be very, very good for the issuance of capital in venture capital, democratized venture capital. If you're a small company, you're trying to raise $500,000, issue a token, has to be approved, and then put it on exchanges like WonderFi up in Canada, which is the largest exchange there that's approved by the Ontario Securities Commission. And the OSC, and then Coinbase in the United States would be the largest in the US. And so they would become your liquidity for North America, and you could issue a token. Now, we need legislation for that. And we're a little ways away. I think we could have the Stablecoin Act in 90 days. I think the tokenization of securities, any security, on the blockchain would be much better than the system we use now. That's going to take probably a couple of years. Mm-hmm. But this is the direction we need to go in, and providing these advanced products, financial services for all 10 sectors. Remember, financial services is one of the 11 sectors, and that's where crypto and blockchain technology should live because it services all the other sectors. And so that's why I've stayed involved. I'm a very large shareholder up in Canada in WonderFi because I think they're going to service the Canadian banks, and they're the largest. And I have investments that I hold in Coinbase as well. I'm a 5% weighting in crypto. I treat it like no security more than 5%.
I own a bunch of different ones. So, but I'm still under 20% as a sector. But it's been volatile, as you suggested.
5% weighting in crypto. I feel like the last time we spoke, it was higher. I don't remember what it was. You might have said 11%. Are you reducing your crypto portfolio?
No, I misspoke there. What I meant was Bitcoin itself is less than 5%, but I also own HBAR, I own Ethereum, I own a lot of USDC. Right now, the sector for me, and all of those are crypto assets, is at around 19%, just over 19. We did the mark to market at year end. We haven't made any adjustments, and it's volatile, obviously, but that feels comfortable for me. A 20% weighting across the portfolio. And that includes investments in things like WonderFi and I also, so no one crypto more than 5%. I have gold at 5%, and that's also performed well for me. But crypto is a sector to me. I think one day it will be the 12th sector of the economy, and so I hold it 19.2 is the exact number right now.
I got to ask you, Kevin, I spoke to former CFTC chair Tim Massad recently, and he said that Trump is in a brazen conflict of interest with the crypto tokens he owns, the crypto tokens that World Liberty Financial's DeFi project owns. What do you think? Do you think it's a conflict of interest? Do you think the president of the United States should be participating in the crypto markets the way he is?
Well, if you haven't gotten used to Trump over 12 years, you will not ever be used to Trump. I mean, I take him as for what he is. I've been fortunate enough to spend some time with him in Mar-a-Lago. He issued those meme coins prior to becoming president, so technically he's probably not offside. I mean, you may not like that, but there's a lot of other things you may not like about Trump. But I stay focused on the signal, not the noise. It's the policy I care about. I don't care about all the noise. And, there's a lot of noise around Trump, but it's irrelevant because the policy is very interesting. And you don't make money on politics. You make money on policy. So you've got to read the tea leaves. You've got to understand where the puck is going. And if it's crypto, it's good because we're going to have regulation. And that's going to bring the sovereign wealth funds, the pension plans, the financial services managers into this space. And that will create more demand. It'll be good for crypto. Meme coins, the whole tokenization is an interesting asset because it's level 2, it's blockchain, and you need to be invested there if you want to be part of what's next in financial services. Now, whether you like his meme coin or not, you don't have to own it. I mean, there are 200,000 tokens in on chain, and so there's going to be some form of consolidation one day. You don't need to own all those. The ones that matter would be tokenization of securities for me, and I'm waiting for that.
Now, I think I ask you this probably every time we talk, but the times change. What are the crypto assets you're most excited about now? And it can be tokens related to tokenization projects. It sounds like you are really interested and invested in those types of projects right now. And where do you see the price of Bitcoin heading?
I think the general trend for Bitcoin will be up, particularly when it's permitted. I'm well aware that many financial institutions that are interested in 1 to 3% weightings in Bitcoin themselves will not invest until their compliance departments agree, and they won't agree until the SEC has ruled on this. As you know, the litigation has been rumored to be dropped under the new SEC. It hasn't happened yet, so we need to see that happen. Excuse me. So what we really need is more just policy moving towards adoption, and then you're going to see a tremendous amount of capital coming in. So I would think you want to be long, probably a good entry point around here. You never know. I mean, people ask me, where's Bitcoin price going to be next month? Anybody that says they know is full of you-know-what.
Yeah, no one knows.
It's pure vol, and you have to be able to stomach. We mark to market our positions every day at 405, but that's irrelevant for crypto. It keeps trading, so it doesn't matter. But I also like some of some of the level 2 products and products like HBAR, which I have a pretty big position in. Ethereum, there's some advancement there. Some other my interest now is more in can I find ownership in the block and tackle? And to me, that's the exchanges. You can't do price discovery without the exchanges. And that's why WonderFi is so big for me. I mean, they are the de facto leader in Canada, the first country to bring an ETF. You got to get price discovery. You got to do it on an exchange. And so my idea is that the Canadian banks will eventually want to offer crypto to their clients within the AUM of the bank balance sheet. Well, there's only one place to go, and that's WonderFi, in my opinion. And so that's why I'm long.
Kevin, thanks so much for joining the show. It is always a pleasure.
Okay. Just gotta find you again here. Where am I here? There we go. So anyways, that was it, people. I know it was long. Thanks for sticking, by all of the videos, sticking around for that. And but anyways, it's to give you an idea of what's coming down and the fact that they are changing the entire monetary system worldwide. So anyways, the XRP is the one that's right now they're going to they went to court, and XRP will be ready in April to be used in the banking systems. Okay, so right now the reason why they are in court was because they were saying that it wasn't feasible, and so they want to regulate it. And now they've met all the regulations, and it should be released or ready to go in mid-April. So XRP right now is selling for $3.60. Time to buy it. Because right now, like, even though we would try to stop this, I think it's in the Canadians, people's best interest to, even if you've got $20, buy it. Okay? Find a way, buy it. So anyways, once they're ready to release that, and that's because Triple, which is the company that has XRP, which is also owned by Elon Musk. Okay, this is the one that Trump is going to want to be hailed as a savior for, and Elon Musk for putting XRP there. But mind you, Elon Musk will probably be making money along with Trump on every time somebody does a transaction, and that's how they're going to make their money, is through transactions. Okay, so they're going to be putting they've got 27 trillion from the banks. So the reason why they went ahead with crypto instead of CBDC right off, but they can still call it CBDC anyways in some different parts of the world, because instead of going through one big bank, the BIS, and then going all the way to all the other banks and being connected, they don't have enough energy to do that. So now they're going to do like, I remember when I was 15, I was told, well, if you go to the Bank of Montreal and you go to the Royal Bank, you got to decide, maybe the stores you're going to go to might not accept that money. So you got to make sure that you go to a bank where that money is going to be accepted by most of the stores. And that was not that long ago, people. So now what they've said is that they've got a couple of options, and that's for the banks to sell the CBDC, aka crypto, and transfer everybody's money into that. And then they're going to connect to the central banks, like the United States is the central bank there. And then we have our Bank of Canada, and our Bank of Canada, we still own, okay? We the people still own our own bank. The United States does not own the Federal Reserve. It's a private bank, okay? A system that lends out to the United States Treasury. So again, there's a lot for you to learn, but at the same time, we can actually, whether this is happening or not doesn't matter. We can't afford to take a chance because it is happening. We can't just say, oh, maybe it won't happen. It is happening. And so again, when you're looking at the dynamics between the United States and Russia and the BRICS already have that set up. Okay, so they're going to make like two IMF type things and separate everything. So they're going at the micro level, and then they'll go into the macro level. So the CBDC was always discussed as the macro level, but they can't do that because you don't have enough buildings built, they don't have enough data centers, they don't have enough electricity, they don't have enough, how can I say, rare earth minerals and stuff like that, uranium. So now but at least now they are starting, and they can do the same as with the crypto as they can with CBDC. And then what's going to happen is there's only 3 that are going to be available under the United States. And because the United States dollar is crashing and they can't afford to pay their debts, they're hoping to be able to pay their debts through crypto. Okay. So even though they tell the American people, oh, you're going to be rich, the country might have money, but not the people, because what they did today, Trump just terminated the act that for the people for their minimum wages to keep going up. He just trashed that. Everything is going privatized in the United States, and that's why Trump is doing what he's doing. The money is being changed worldwide. So that's it for tonight, people. Thanks for sticking around. And we're going to have a very interesting meeting with our CPU members on next Tuesday. Please don't miss it. We might, be prepared to be there a little bit longer. It starts at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. But we're going to be going through all of this stuff, and you need to be aware. And if you can buy even $20 worth of XRP, invest it. As long as it's $20, you can afford to lose, or whatever money you can afford. Go ahead and invest in it, and then maybe Canada can kind of take that over. So there'd be a real difference if the people owned it and the people could control it to make sure they can't do what they want to do with the CBDC. It would look very different, very different. It might even help everybody out, but who knows? Okay, I was never a believer in crypto. I didn't want to touch it. I knew it was part of the U.S. government, and that's why the U.S. government is putting $17 billion in it. Oh, they don't own it, but yeah, they do. So anyways, a lot of BS coming out from the United States and worldwide. It is the reset. It is done. Do not believe them when they say they're not part of the WEF and blah, blah, blah. It's all BS. Okay? They're going to hit us where we don't even expect it, because they need to create chaos, and chaos they are creating. Okay? So anyways, have a good night. I will leave you with one last word, and make sure to spread this around ASAP.
Attention, Canadians. Do you feel disconnected from our current political system? This could be our last chance to take a real legal stand for our rights. It's time to shift the political power to its rightful owners, the Canadian citizens and Indigenous peoples of Canada. Dive into our history, understand the need for change, and embark on the quest for true democracy. Are you concerned about our nation's commitment to human rights and self-governance? The power shift to freedom aligns with vital treaties and international laws enabling us to claim our rightful place as collective head of state. We advocate legally replacing the Crown, King Charles III, and our partocracy system with a true democracy, the peoples as the true collective head of state with veto power over our governance, to ensure your voice counts more than party interests. When our national collective civil and political rights are respected, your influence on policies will be direct and impactful. Join us on this noble struggle to make every Canadian and Indigenous peoples a meaningful participant in our future as collective head of state, which was legally owed and kept from us since the patriation of our Constitution, an official decolonization from the United Kingdom of 1982. It's time to correct the past of our government's lies and omissions to the people of our great country before it is too late. People 15 years old and over can sign our Canadian People's Referendum at canadianreferendum.ca and unite for our rights as the collective head of state in our Constitution. Together, we can be the example in reshaping Canada's future, not just for us, but for all peoples worldwide, once and for all. Are you ready to be part of this transformative movement? Join the Power Shift to Freedom movement by the Canadian People's Union and be part of a bold vision for Canada's future. Visit thecpu.ca for more details. Embrace and face the change required on your part to shape our future. Attention